And he was a number guy, you know?
I thought Cooney told us we needed
And you want to know why the banking industry's in the condition it's in, you know?
Start the meeting. Morning, everyone. This is the Grand Traverse County Ways and Means Committee meeting. This committee makes recommendations to the full Board of Commissioners, and that will happen at the last Wednesday of the month at 7 p.m. at this location. If you have a cell phone, please put it on vibrate or turn it off if you could. That'd be much appreciated.
Be all of ours too, right?
Yep. We will call the meeting to order. The first item is the Pledge of Allegiance. We can stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, before we do the roll call, I'd like to make an announcement that Commissioner Bruce Hooper, Commissioner Beth Friend, Commissioner Mike Stepka did call in advance and asked to be excused from this meeting. So we will start with the roll call, please.
Commissioner Wheelock?
Yes, ma'am.
Thomas?
Yes.
Richardson?
Here.
Max Bauer? Here. Fleece?
Present.
Enman?
Here. Okay, we have a quorum. Now is the first public comment in our agenda. So does any member of the public wish to address the Ways and Means Committee? And if you do, if you can state your name and try to keep it within 3 minutes, we would appreciate that. So does any member wish to speak to the committee at this time? Hearing none, we will close public comment. We would now move to approve the agenda. And before I take a motion, Dennis, it's my understanding that we have a request to add something to the agenda from the Sheriff's Department?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. The sheriff has an opportunity to submit a COPS grant application to the federal government. This is a second phase submittal based on the one we did middle of last year, I guess. And he's asking that be added to the agenda because it has a deadline of, I think, tomorrow.
Okay. So you want to put that under administration or new business?
New business would be fine.
Okay, we'll add that to new business, if it's accepted by the board. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda with the addition of the sheriff's request under new business?
Mr. Chairman, I would move to approve the agenda with the addition of the COPS grant application under new business.
Moved by Commissioner Wheelock.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Richardson. Is there discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, passes. Okay, that will be added. We will now move on to the next item, which is special presentation. Pleased to have members from the Northwest Michigan Council of Governments here to give us a kind of a real quick summary of their annual report. We have Elaine Wood and Matt McCauley here. You now have the floor. Welcome. Good morning.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. The reason we're here is to give you a quick summary of our annual report, and because we have been and hope to continue to be in your budget for roughly $14,200. So I'm going to start with, before I distribute the annual report, start with just a little bit of history, because it occurred to me last night that over the years things get a little muddy in our minds about why we do things certain ways and why we don't. In the state of Michigan, counties are basically assigned by the state to a region for workforce development. And they're assigned to a region for regional planning and economic development. And they're also assigned to a region for Michigan Prisoner Reentry.
Can you put the microphone closer to you? There you go. Thank you.
And we're fortunate that in our case, all those boundaries line up to the same 10 counties. In many parts of the state, they don't. Those boundaries don't line up. Originally, there were 2 regional agencies in Northwest Michigan in those 10 counties, one for Workforce Development and one for Regional Planning Commission. In 1984, the 10 counties said, look, we've got 2 regional agencies headed by county commissioners from the same 10 counties. We've lost almost all of our funding for the Regional Planning Commission by the time the early 80s came around. But they didn't want to lose that, so what they did was they combined those 2 regional agencies into one and renamed it the Northwest Michigan Council of Governments, and that was in 1984. Prior to that, you had the Northwest Michigan Employment and Training Consortium and the Northwest Michigan Regional Planning and Development Commission. When you had the Northwest Michigan Regional Planning and Development Commission, there has always been from the beginning a required match on the part of the counties for all of the federal money that comes in for regional planning and economic development. When the 2 regional agencies were merged, that match continued. It has been at the same amount since 1984. It hasn't increased. It was reduced substantially in 1984 when those 2 agencies were merged. It was reduced down to the rate it is now, which is $55,000. So it hasn't gone up since that time, 84. It's not our idea to increase that at any point that I can see. Because what we've done is we have supplemented that with fee-for-service work. So the $55,000 matches the Economic Development Administration funding that the region gets and others, which I'll show you on the report. For every dollar of those $55,000 that's contributed by the 10 counties, we are able to receive in direct return $3,000. So it's a $1 match, a $3,000 return of federal funds into the region. That's just the direct dollars that come in. Then, as you'll see on the report, there are some other dollars that come in because of that. In order for our communities to be eligible to receive Economic Development Administration and other federal funding for projects like, in the past it was mostly industrial parks, but it can be other infrastructure type projects for economic development, you have to be in an economic development district and you have to have a comprehensive economic development plan, which the Council of Governments does, and the projects have to be listed in that plan. So it's really a federal requirement to participate in, or in order to participate in that project, in those dollars, the counties have to match that EDA grant that comes in to do that plan. So that's kind of the history. The allocation among the 10 counties was determined back in '84. It's kind of published by us on a decade basis, so we're still working on the 2000 to 2010 decade. We haven't revised the formula since that time. And obviously Grand Traverse County has the biggest share of the $55,000 at $14,210 because it's based on population and real property taxable value. So, with that history, I'll get to the annual report. We
We'll just pass that down.
had decided this year not to publish an annual report on paper. We wanted to save on printing costs and save on paper, so we actually are publishing our annual report on the web this year, and we're having meetings around the region to present the annual report. We had one yesterday in Traverse City. Commissioner Max Bauer and Inman were there. But because that's a tough transition for a lot of people to make, and because it's hard for all of you to get to those kinds of events, I did put together a summary handout. What the summary gives you is a lot of numbers, but it doesn't give you any of the people part of it. It doesn't give you feedback from businesses or customers or partner organizations about our work. So it's really a one-dimensional thing, this piece of paper that you've got here. And so I really would encourage you to go on the website and look at the whole annual report where you'll get a more comprehensive picture of what we did in the past year. So this is the report for fiscal year '09. And at the top, you can see the financial summary. Last year, our budget was roughly $17,000 of which is pretty much 100% grant funded, except for the $55,000 that comes from the 10 counties.
17 million,
17 million, what did I say?
17,000.
Oh, slip. 17 million. And about 78% of that is federal. The county match that's required is for the activities that we do in business and economic development and regional planning. And so if you parse out the budget for those particular departments, which are MATS areas, it's about 1.2 or 1.3 million. So there's the return on investment of the county match, of the $55,000. If you just, that's the $3,000 to one match there. In business and economic development, we do some things that are very sort of big picture and other things that are very oriented towards specific companies. On a big picture basis, we're working closely with lots of community partners, chambers, economic development organizations. Tino Brightup is one of our primary partners. We share some staff with Tino. We share lots of activities, working in really close partnership. We concentrated last year on trying to continue to push forward the notion of the knowledge economy and helping everybody understand what that really means and what kind of economic transformation we're really facing. And we had about 130 people attend training sessions. And we also are working with, of course, in our role with the Economic Development Administration on the creation of that regional economic development strategy. In our Procurement Technical Assistance Center, where we're working directly with companies to help them diversify their markets and retain and create jobs, we really went wild last year. We had pretty much doubled the program, bringing in over $107 million of government contract business into the region. I'm really skipping over a lot of stuff here. In the Small Business and Technology Development Center, where we counsel small businesses, and two of our counselors for your county's area are partnered with Traverse Bay Economic Development Corporation. We provided over 3,000 hours of business counseling to 425 companies. 133 additional startup companies were served. 175 companies went through business training, like financing, marketing, business plan writing, that kind of thing. And in capital formation, new capital formation, we had over $24 million as well. We have a sustainable business forum that helps companies learn how to be sustainable in the broadest sense, sort of that triple bottom line that is now commonly used in companies. And through our Michigan Works division, we served 316 different companies on human resource type needs directly, recruiting, screening, training employees, and other kinds of HR issues. In Matt's other area, regional planning and community development, we have a number of sort of categories. Transportation is our biggest one by far. We do the annual road rating, which you use, your road commission. We do that in cooperation with your road commission, and that's used to help determine how to assign your scarce resources for road improvements. So we did the condition rating on roughly 3,000 miles of roads. We provide assistance to 3 different heritage routes in the region, one of which is in Grand Traverse County on M37. And of course, we're helping to coordinate the Grand Vision project, and our particular role in the Grand Vision is to help develop the transportation options and to foster greater investment in the planned growth areas, village centers in particular, in cities. In the land use area, this year, or last year, we did a manual for planning for green infrastructure, so local units of government can use that in their policy making. We convened a housing task force, which we've been working closely with Jean Dorenzi and others on that, and did a housing needs assessment, which I know you're all familiar with. You had a report on it last year. to kind of explore the feasibility and foster the expansion of workforce housing options. And then, of course, New Designs for Growth, which we inherited from the Chamber of Commerce. We have been greatly expanding that, and last year we really took it to a new level, putting lots of training modules on the web and that kind of thing. In education, we do lots of different workshops and seminars. We had 20 different ones last year with over 300 people attending. These are people from your planning commissions, township bodies of different kinds, and so on. In energy and environmental management, there was a lot of activity that started up last year. The one in particular that we want to highlight is our grant from the Michigan Public Service Commission, which is energy efficiency for local government. And through that, we will be distributing $800,000 in direct cash assistance to local units of government for you to cut costs through energy efficiency and implement projects that help you cut your energy costs. Everything we do in workforce development is done under that name Michigan Works, and we have 5 Michigan Works centers in the 10 counties, 1 over on Garfield. I am not going to take a lot of time to go over all these different services. You can look at this summary here, but suffice it to say that we get about 130,000 visitors or visits per year in our Michigan Works centers. On the job seeker side, and then we get about 12,000 visits from employers who actually come in the center, do their hiring and recruiting there. Most of our services to companies, though, are out in the field. We go out to them, but they do come in and use the centers. We have programs for special populations, people transitioning from welfare to work, people coming home from prison on parole, people who are losing their jobs due to layoffs and business closings. We have very high success rates despite the economy in the state that it's in right now, particularly in our training programs where, once people get a credential from a college, which we cover their costs for that if they are economically disadvantaged. We have anywhere from 75% to, in one program on the job training, 95%. Success rate in employment for those folks. In our youth programs, we're doing a wide variety of different activities. These are youth who are the hardest to serve, youth with disabilities, youth with criminal records, dropouts, other young people. When we say youth, we're talking generally about 16 to 24, so it's really young adults in most cases. We have an alternative school out on Beaver Island. It's really the alternative school to the alternative schools. Most of the kids who go out there are told to go by the courts or by other agencies like social services. Last year we had a very large summer youth work experience program, which was funded by Recovery Act money. We had 323 young people getting jobs for the summer at 147 different work sites, all of which were public sector sites. I mentioned the training. Some of it's done at the colleges, some of it's done on the job, and some of it's done at the workplace for incumbent workers. And you can see the numbers there in the middle part of that third, or whatever page that is, second to the last page. We also run the adult education programs. Unfortunately, we still have many people in our region who do not have high school diplomas, who do not read at even an 8th grade level, or do math at even a 5th or 6th grade level, and they are virtually unemployable in today's economy. And so in our Michigan Works Learning Labs, we served last year over 1,700 people for remediation, for GEDs, for English as a second language, and many of them completed their high school diploma or their GED. We provided over 73,000 hours of instruction in our adult ed programs. We have 3 skills alliances. I'm not going to take a lot of time to go over those, but in hospitality and particularly in healthcare, which is our fastest growing industry sector, we're doing a great deal of training. It's all employer driven. All these programs are designed by the employers. They tell us what kind of training they need and want. They actually get into the curriculum design. We contract out with community colleges and other groups to provide that training for us. In community safety, we were the Community Corrections Board for 7 of the 10 counties. That doesn't include you, so I'm not going to go over that. The Michigan Prisoner Reentry Initiative is the last thing I'll mention. This is a state initiative to accomplish 2 things. One is improve community safety by reducing recidivism, additional crimes committed by parolees that would send them back to prison, and therefore also reduce costs to taxpayers, because it costs us, taxpayers, about $33,000 a year to keep someone in prison. In Michigan Prisoner Reentry Initiative, if we can help somebody through a successful parole without committing another crime and going back to prison, it costs us about $3,000 for the course of services to that parolee during their parole period. So $3,000, $33,000 a year, big difference. Our baseline data comes from 1998. Our recidivism rate in Northwest Michigan at that time was 56.6%. That was a little bit lower than the state average, which I think was 58, but still awfully high. Last year, our recidivism rate was 32%. That was a reduction in returns to prison of 24.6%. So it's very clear statewide and here in Northwest Michigan that MPRI is having a significant impact on both safety and costs. So that is the very quick summary. Matt, do you have anything that I missed that you'd like to add? And
Okay, any questions for Elaine or Matt? Commissioner Maxwell.
I don't really have any questions, but I just wanted to say that I really was glad I attended yesterday morning. The presentation was extremely educational for me. I noticed how you directed your training towards the needs of the community as far as jobs are concerned, and I especially enjoyed watching the video of the young people learning how to weld, because apparently there's a need for welders. But you really,
for that.
but truly, I mean, you're making a difference in the community, and the video was extremely well done, and thank you very much.
thank you. Yeah, those videos are powerful, and the numbers, the numbers are just numbers, but when you hear people in their own voices say, hey, I learned a skill and I got a job because of it.
And the need is huge. I was driving through town the other day, and 3 young boys flagged me down, and it was early in the morning, and so I rolled my window down, and they needed a ride over to where their vehicle was. I talked to them on the way over there. The 3 boys, the oldest one was 17, were homeless. 2 of them had already dropped out of school. One of them said, well, I graduate in a year if I go back. I gave them my card and said, let me try and help you. Right now they're sleeping on sofas of friends. I got home, called Mary Maroy, went, what do I do here? And now I'm trying to find the young men. But just that one incident, there is truly a need in this community for what you do, and thank you.
There is. And I have to say, to me, one of the most interesting things about Michigan Works is that we're working with those young people all the way to someone who worked at the same company for 25 years, has tremendous skills, has a tremendous work ethic, and lost his job, and is 52 years old, and doesn't have much hope for ever getting that same kind of work again, and needs to be retrained and reemployed and start over at that age in life, and everything in between. And so it's quite a gamut of different needs that people have.
Any other, Dennis Loya?
Elaine, have we ever, I should know this, but have we ever explored the idea of using your adult education program in our jail as opposed to the GED program that I think we contract for now?
I think we have, Dennis,
Okay.
and I think somebody from the county has talked with our adult ed coordinator.
Okay.
And I know, I'll check on it for you and let you know where we stand right now, because I'm
Okay.
not positive. But I think in the past, we have come in and done some work in the jail, but I'm just not positive right now.
You don't do that with any of the other jails in the other counties?
I believe we do,
Oh, do
in
you?
some cases.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Commissioner Wheelock?
I guess the only thing I would say, if there's any way you can fix your phone system at the Michigan Works so you can actually have somebody talk on the other end of the phone, life would be much better. From an employer standpoint, I can never get through to talk to
To your business
anybody.
liaison?
You know, the only way I talk to my business liaison is I have her cell phone number, and it's the only way I can deal with it, because
Yeah.
calling the office is just terribly frustrating. You can expect to be on hold, waiting for the next available person for 12 to 15 minutes every time.
The business liaisons are on the road all the time, so that's why they do use their cell phones.
I'm just saying, the regular phone system just doesn't work very well.
I'll pass that on.
I do, I have had opportunity to do the prisoner reentry program right now. I'm in my third go-round with that, and that program seems to be working very well.
You've hired people through that?
I'm on my third one right now.
Fantastic.
Wow, cool. Anyone else? Well, I would just like to say that, it's an honor to be a part of the Council of Governments and, listening to what they do and viewing the success stories on an individual basis. And like Commissioner Maxwell said, I've been sitting on the board for quite a while, and even I learned a few things about how close it gets to people's lives and how unemployment and skill building really makes a big difference in our community. And the testimonies they had on video yesterday really sunk home about, what kind of an effect we're having in our community with the Council of Governments and Michigan Works. So I think we're getting a huge dividend by our participation with the 10 counties. So appreciate you coming this morning.
Thank you. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Okay. All right, moving on to the consent calendar, if we can have that. Before we read the consent calendar, just make a reminder that we have closed minutes for May 19th. If you can open up your envelopes and take a look at it, and then while she's reading the consent calendar, please.
The purpose of the consent calendar is to expedite business by grouping non-controversial items together to be dealt with by one commission motion without discussion. Any member of the commission, staff, or the public may ask that any item on the consent calendar be removed therefrom and placed elsewhere on the agenda for full discussion. Such requests will be automatically respected. If any item is not removed from the consent calendar, the action noted, receive and file or approval, is approved by a single committee action adopting the consent calendar. A, receive and file. Number 1, Child Care Fund. B, approve. Number 1, Ways and Means Committee minutes of May 19th, 2010. Number 2, closed session minutes of May 19th, 2010. Number 3, GIS authorization to apply for a USGS grant for $10,000.
Okay, the consent calendar has been read. Does any member of the public wish to pull any of the items off the consent calendar for further discussion? Hearing none, does any of the board members wish to pull a consent item off the calendar? Commissioner Wheelock.
Mr. Chairman, I would move to approve the consent calendar as adopted.
Okay. Moved by Commissioner Wheelock to approve the consent calendar as presented, supported by Commissioner Fleece. Discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Thomas?
Yes.
Richardson?
Yes.
Max Bauer?
Yes.
Fleece?
Yes.
Wheelock?
Yes, ma'am.
Inman?
Yes. Okay, motion passes. Moving on to department action items. First item is information technology. Morning.
You want to pass your closed
State your
minutes?
name and position at the county.
Minutes to pass them to Bonnie.
Don Sheehan, IT Director.
Randy Filkins, Telecommunications.
And the first item we had was the document imaging scanners. It's a renewal of maintenance for those. Most of these have all been purchased for the document imaging system that was implemented here in the last couple of years. And it's an on-site, we're out for bid and are recommending the low bidder for that.
And that would be CDW&G for $11,330.
Mr. Chairman, I would move to approve the maintenance contract with CDW&G in the amount of $11,330 for a one-year contract for scanner maintenance.
Support.
Moved by Commissioner Wheelock, support by Commissioner Thomas to approve the item as presented. Any discussion? Commissioner Max Bauer.
This contract renewal is only for a year. You bid this out annually, and how often does the maintenance need to be done?
Well, as they break is when maintenance gets done on
Okay.
them. There's also where we can call them on an annual basis just to come in and do a thorough cleaning of a scanner also.
Okay.
Don, would there be an advantage of doing a multi-year contract for this project, or you don't think so?
We hadn't looked into it this time. Even as we've added scanners, then they come in as like a partial year, and so the 1 year brings them all in line with the same termination date, but it is something that we can look at.
Well, that
Dennis?
was going to be my question as well.
Okay.
And Don, I wondered, and this would be for the board, obviously, we have a recommendation here, but I wondered if at least the board wouldn't consider adopting the contract and amending the contract to allow for a 1-year renewal for up to 3 years at the same price. And then if we're able to get that, although you may not want to put the price in there and just negotiate an agreement, because this price went down. So that's really up to you, but it would give us an opportunity to kind of leverage a couple more years at a lower price if possible. It's really a call of the board. But in the future, Don, even if we don't do that, I would say next time, let's look at a 3-year, so we don't have to do this annually.
So does the motion
As-
stand?
As the motion, I would have no problem with a renewal if it could be negotiated, not to exceed this number of dollars.
Okay. So, second, agree with that? Okay. Further discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, passes. Moving on to the phone system, server upgrade.
We asked for a proposal from Strategic Products and Services out of Grand Rapids. They're an ideal partner. We asked for State of Michigan pricing for an upgrade to the Law Enforcement Center phone system. I want to give you a little background. Excuse me. In 2005, we looked at the phone system to see if there was any way we could streamline it, consolidate it, to save some costs on maintenance and just running the system. We took a look at all the sites. We have 6 sites that we're providing phone service to. We looked at those 6 sites and decided which ones were critical sites and which ones were non-critical. Critical site would be a site that couldn't go down. The phone system had to stay up as much as possible. The non-critical sites would be sites that could do without the phone system for a short amount of time. In that process, the non-critical sites ended up being Public Services Building, Front Street, and Civic Center. The critical sites were Gov Center, Health Department, and Law Enforcement Center. In 2005, we did our first IP site, which was Civic Center. In that same year, we also upgraded the first 2 critical sites, which were the Gov Center and the Health Department. We put in new servers there, could back each other up. And I guess in 2008, we had 3 voicemail servers. We whittled it down to 1 voicemail server at the main site. 2009, we went through and turned the other 2 non-critical sites to IP phones. The IP phones don't have a phone system. They share the resources back at the main site and use the fiber ring that Power put in to get back to the main site. Let's see here. So the proposal is in 2003, we put in the Law Enforcement Center, and then we left it there and didn't do any upgrades to it because we were trying to get to the point where it was out of end of life. And then at that point, we were going to upgrade it to be our last critical site. That's the upgrade we're asking for today. One snag we hit in the process was we budgeted for upgrade that would cost $38,500, and that was budgeted, the first payment was budgeted for in the 2010 budget, which would have been $3,850. One of the requirements of this configuration is in order for the 3 critical sites to act as one switch, they all have to be at the same software level. So when the new load of software came out this year. They changed the requirement in hardware at 2 sites, which wasn't in the first upgrade. They would not work with the new software, so the upgrade got moved. The amount of the upgrade increased to $89,448.95, which is what the upgrade, that's what we're asking for today. They are offering GSA pricing, and it is the lowest price that we can get for state of Michigan pricing. There are some rebates in Avaya, the manufacturer of the switch, that bring it down actually a little bit lower than the state of Michigan pricing. So, benefits of the system is that there's increased stability and reliability of the whole phone system because of new software upgrade. All of the sites get to use it because it's the core is all going to be at that level, so all of the IP sites and all of the things running off the main system will all get the benefits of the new software. There's a built-in redundancy in that because we have 3 sites working as one. If one of the sites has a problem, the server goes down or we lose connection, one of the other 2 sites can take over for the system and run the phone system for all the sites. So we can use, we have a cheaper call rates because we can share trunks between the 3 sites. They all have their own trunk, which is the vehicle which they push calls in and out of the system. If one of those trunks goes down or lose connection to one of the sites, we can switch to a different site automatically. Calls out of that. So the benefit there is because all of our calls are going out one trunk, and we have one trunk here or 2 trunks at the main site that have unlimited capacity for local calls. We pay a set price no matter how many calls go out, so we can route all of them to the cheapest trunk. The system is all up. So my recommendation is that we move towards this. This is the last step in finalizing our centralized network configuration. I'd like to take advantage of the state of Michigan contract that guarantees us the lowest pricing from Avaya manufacturer. Avaya also has agreed to finance the project over a span of 5 years at 0% financing, and we're already doing that on switches. So it is recommended to upgrade the law enforcement center and add those 2 sites in that have hardware added for the amount of $89,448.95.
Randy, I think we need
Dennis.
to, thank you. I think we need to clarify a little bit kind of the financing of this and the
All right.
budget implications of this. So you've already upgraded 2 sites.
Correct.
This building, or this complex, and the health services building, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, that was in 2005, so
Right.
we're 5 years out since.
So, and what's the useful life? What's the
They
life
are
of these?
both at end of life as of this year, at end of coverage.
For accounting purposes, we use a 5-year
5-year
life.
depreciation, okay. So, but my point is, we upgraded those 2, we didn't upgrade this building, the law enforcement center.
Right.
It was part of our plan to upgrade all 3,
Correct.
and so, even though this year we were planning on upgrading law enforcement center, the other 2 buildings are coming to end of life,
Also.
and we were going to do those, what, next year, the year after that,
Correct.
something like
So we
that?
are saving that upgrade that would have happened maybe next year. or the
Okay,
year.
did we pay for those 2 upgrades cash? Did we pay them over time? How did we do those?
We had them financed through that same 0.
Okay, so my question is this, I know we're upgrading all 3 sites, where last time was $148,000 to upgrade 2 sites, now we're upgrading all 3 for $89,000.
It's cheaper.
But my question is, have we been budgeting money to finance and pay off that upgrade of those other 2 sites?
Correct.
And that money will now go into this financing. So for the commissioner's standpoint, I guess the question that they're I'm guessing they're asking is this costing more? Is this costing less? How much more?
Let me take a stab at that. Randy's, the paragraph at the bottom of page 22, he kind of skipped over that, but this is an overall savings in the capital cost of $60,000. And we do, in the fund that Randy operates out of, the upgrades are accounted for as a fixed asset, and we depreciate them over their useful life, which the annual cost then that Randy factors into his rates is the depreciation cost. And with the reduction of $60,000, that is a savings over a 5-year period. If you look at the 5 years from 2005 through 2010, all of the departments that are billed back for the cost of the system will have lower rates because of the lower cost. And the advantage also is that our maintenance cost continues to decrease on the system. So it will be built into the budget, and it should, and it will result in lower rates over the next 5 years.
And of course, we put the money in for most departments to pay those rates, to reimburse those rates. It's part of indirect cost.
Okay. Dennis, are you satisfied with that
I am.
explanation? All right. The commission. Commissioner Wheelock.
Randy, I guess I'm still a little unclear. With this, we also upgrade the other two primary systems, the one here and the one at the Health Department. So does that give me a useful life of all three systems through 2015 then?
Yeah, at least 5 years out, yes, before they would have to be upgraded.
Okay, so we wouldn't have to do anything for 5 years on the systems if we do this, other than routine maintenance, I'm assuming.
The voicemail server is a little bit old, may come up before then, but other than that, yeah, the system itself should be good.
And are we having problems with the system at the Law Enforcement Center at this time?
At this time, it's running and it's 7 years old, so it's a really old software load, and it's not compatible, with the other system. It acts as kind of a standalone system as it is. And this would bring it into, it also would, the other benefit would be is that right now, if they lose phone service, they go down to an auto attendant of sorts that asks for the extension and lets them pick 3 or 4 different departments inside the law enforcement center. If we upgrade the system, they wouldn't go down, they would have their own trunk, and they would just go to producing their own calls. So that's a benefit that they would see, automatically. That we don't have now.
All right, you all set? Commissioner Fleece.
Randy, on the financing of this, you're going to finance the $89,449 for a period of 5 years at 0%,
Yes, that's
but your payment is 10%.
correct, and that's the depreciation, because it's capitalized.
Yeah, the way
Yeah,
they
but-
set it up, the depreciation, they do 10% the first year, we do 20% the next 4, and 10% in the last. I guess, Dean, it's usually, we get into it half year, is usually what they figure on the first part. So that's why the first is only 10%. Actually, the following year, that number will double to cover to
For the
20%.
following,
Following 4
It'll
years.
be, yeah.
Right, is that correct, Dean?
yeah, but you're only going to be at 90% then.
Well, then we still have 10% actually in the 6th year, so technically it's,
I thought it's a
6 years.
5-year at 0%.
But it'll start in the middle of this year.
It starts in the middle
So
of
our
the
budget
year,
year
and
is
it
a
ends in the
calendar
middle.
year, so it'll only be
Yeah.
6 months this year, 4 years, and then 6 months.
and I guess the
in
financing with, through this contract is still separately than how Dean bills us on a depreciation
Right.
level. Is that-
The amount that Randy has in his document is how we account for it and depreciate and recover the cost. I'm not sure what the financing will be. Is it a 3-year, 5-year? Probably a 3-year.
Elias financing? It is a
Yes.
5-year.
5-year at 0.
Yeah, so it would be approximately, they generally do it in even amounts, so it's going to be about 20% each year. I mean, we won't have to pay the full $90,000. It'll be done over a 5-year period. I mean, for cash flow purposes, it's a pretty good deal. There's usually an imputed interest rate on it, though, and we have to file a form with the federal government. I can't tell you what the imputed interest. Do we have that information?
They don't,
Until we commit, I think, to the purchase, they don't tell us what the repayment provisions
said
are.
it would be the same terms as the last time we used them.
Don't know if they'd be the same terms, but we don't know what the annual payment would be, but it would be approximately 20% of the total cost.
Commissioner
Yeah,
Richardson?
normally in that
Go ahead,
situation,
I'm sorry.
they take the principal and, at least in my business, and divide it in equal numbers by the term of the thing and 0% financing. But
That's approximately what they do, but there is some imputed interest, and it has to be disclosed to the IRS.
All set, Commissioner Flees?
Yep.
Commissioner Richardson?
Well, just to put on the table, I'd like to make a motion that the county upgrade the law enforcement center phone system along with governmental center and health department to the latest Avaya software release and award the project to Strategic Products and Services in the amount of $89,448.95 with $8,949 to be paid out of the 2010 budget.
Support. Okay, moved by Commissioner Richardson, support by Commissioner Flees to move forward with the staff recommendation as presented. Discussion. We have Commissioner Max Bauer and then Commissioner Wheelock.
What are our annual maintenance costs?
Our annual maintenance costs are,
I think we're probably going to have to get back with you.
yeah, I would have to get back to you on that. Basically, when I calculated them out, we were saving 20% from where we were back in 2005.
I want to know how much.
Would you get us that number, Randy? And
I will get that
perhaps you
number.
can even, email it to me or text it down to me, and I can tell the commissioners while this meeting's still going on, okay?
Sure.
Okay, Commissioner Wheelock.
Dean, because in this packet, you want us to cut $750,000 out of this year's budget, so I want to know, have you identified the funding for this project, or is this ongoing funding that we currently have in the budget? It will just be that amount will be committed for the next 5 years.
The latter, it'll be ongoing funding.
And in fact, as Dean said, it'll be at a lesser amount because of this
Correct.
price.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I'd just like to say, Randy's done a great job looking at all these systems and trying to reduce costs where we can and yet not reduce the level of service anybody's getting from the phone system. I think in most cases, we've still improved that, even by bringing the phone systems down and doing the consolidation.
Thanks, Randy.
All right, thank you for coming this morning. Moving on to the Land Bank Authority. Gina, are you going to handle that, or? Bring your entourage up. Get everyone introduced.
Good morning. My name is Jean Dorenzi with the Grand Traverse County Planning and Development Department.
I'm Sarah Lucas. I'm a regional planner with the Northwest Michigan Council of Governments.
Our presentation today is twofold. I will go through the steps that the Land Bank Authority has taken to get to where we are today, and Sarah will talk about the housing needs for our community and the importance of the Housing Trust Fund. Also today is many members of our housing work group that are in attendance today. The Land Bank Authority has been investigating with our stakeholders opportunities to implement goals and objectives of both the County Board of Commissioners and the Land Bank Authority. The specific goal of the County Board of Commissioners is to improve access and quantity of affordable housing to the residents of Grand Traverse County. Before we started the investigation, the Land Bank Authority put parameters for our working group and staff to utilize. And those three parameters was the utilization of the housing needs assessment. We've had many housing studies throughout the course of Grand Traverse County, and you just received a report last year on the housing needs, and we wanted to utilize the statistics from that report and build on that. The second parameter was to build on current programs within Grand Traverse County. Don't develop another new program. Try to build on current operations within Grand Traverse County. And the third was that any program that we look at and to build on, that no general fund dollars be utilized for that program, not just the startup, but the whole operation of it as well. So over the past several years, the stakeholders in our working group brought in some national experts, specifically Mary Brooks from the National Trust Fund. We talked to both the Land Bank Authority and our working group. We also talked to Michael Freeman from the Center for Community Progress, who is both the Land Bank and Land Use, a national organization. We looked at funding sources on how this trust fund could be funded. And we looked at the legal possibilities. Our legal counsel looked at, can the structure is it a legal structure that could be organized? And then we looked at opportunities for matching funds from MSHDA and through foundations as well. The Housing Trust Fund is proposed to be funded from the foreclosure fund. And the foreclosure fund was created on the public proceeds from the auction. And the proceeds, after we pay back the county for the back taxes on those properties, the proceeds go into this foreclosure fund. And because of the county treasurer being the foreclosing agent, those net proceeds are now a new funding source for Grand Traverse County. Before the treasurer was the foreclosing agent, those would go down to Lansing. And the other piece that why we looked at the foreclosure fund was that we never utilized that fund for a general fund operation. Those have always been kept into the foreclosure fund and utilized for for the Land Bank Authority and possible housing projects. The Housing Trust Fund would be a dedicated source for our for affordable housing projects, both new and rehab. And within your packet, we provided two examples from the Foundation of Mental Health and from MSHDA on how their operation would benefit from a housing trust fund within our community. As I started the presentation, I indicated that the Land Bank Authority looked at our strategic plan and for the county board strategic plan, and your goal was to improve access and quantity of affordable housing. You put that in there based on studies that have been completed on the needs for workforce housing. And Sarah will talk about those studies.
Thank you. I'm here today on behalf of the Grand Traverse Region Housing Task Force. And for those of you who aren't familiar with that group, it's a 6-county group of housing stakeholders from nonprofits, developers, lenders, realtors, anyone that's involved in the housing issue in the Grand Traverse region. They've been around as a group for about 15, 20 years now. They started in the 90s as a way to deal with affordable housing as a land use issue, which was something that hadn't really been addressed before. Since they began working, they have accomplished quite a bit. They actually sponsored the first housing needs assessment in the 90s, and those have been updated every few years just to give us an up-to-date picture on the housing needs. They sponsored the creation of the Continuum of Care, which addresses homelessness needs. They created a nonprofit, which is Homestretch, which has been very active over the last 10 or 15 years, and they've done a lot of advocacy and education work as well. All of that activity has resulted in a lot of permanent affordable housing, millions of dollars in homelessness prevention funds, and the creation of a 10-year Vision to End Homelessness plan that was endorsed by the state of Michigan. The Council of Governments has been providing staff assistance for about the last 3 years, and since we've been a part of that, we've, again, as Jean mentioned, updated the housing needs assessment for Grand Traverse County. We've done a regulatory barriers study looking at the implications of plans and zoning ordinances on housing issues, created a housing website that includes all of the housing programs for greater awareness for the public, and we developed a housing strategy. We also took on implementation of the housing aspects of the Grand Vision, And as part of that work, we created some goals and objectives, essentially looking at how we can create more affordable housing in location-efficient and energy-efficient designs, and how we can work for more consistent housing policies at the local level. As I mentioned, the Housing Task Force is made up of pretty diverse members. We have nonprofits, lenders, realtors, local governments. And the reason that the membership is so diverse on this group is because there's a lot of recognition regionally that housing isn't, that housing is an issue that touches on everyone's lives. It touches on all parts of the community. And we realize that without affordable housing, without permanent affordable housing, we have families living in substandard housing, families living very far from their employment, creating additional traffic. We have families leaving the area with their kids. We have families at increased risk of homelessness and increased risk of foreclosure. So we, as the Housing Task Force, recognize that we have to address this holistically and in partnership with a variety of different agencies. A lot of the members on the Housing Task Force are nonprofit housing developers or service providers, and they're supported by a number of different programs offered through state and federal organizations, primarily the Michigan State Housing Development Authority and HUD, and there's also a lot of private foundation support as well. Those have been very effective. We've done a lot with those sources of funding, but there's some issues that are not being addressed, and there's some obstacles to providing program needs through those programs alone. Even when we do have access to funding from those organizations or programs, they're not designed to address the specific needs in rural areas is something that we run into a lot. They're designed on a state or national level and often don't touch on some of the issues that we have in rural areas. They also may or may not cover the operational needs of an organization, and so what we're left with is organizations that are really struggling in terms of capacity to meet all the service needs that their customers have. And I mentioned that they're not designed for this area or for rural areas, but particularly over the last few years as the state has been experiencing more economic problems, and urban areas have been having issues with abandonment and blight and foreclosure are really having kind of a ripple effect in those communities. State programs are being directed to those urban areas and are being directed away from from rural areas, and that results in a situation where we don't have as many resources to work with as we used to, as those funding sources are redirected to other areas. Another issue that's come up over the last few years, as we've had some turmoil in the financial markets, is one of the funding sources that has traditionally been used for affordable housing is the low-income tax credit market, and it's become a lot more difficult to access that funding as well, as banks are struggling. Foundation grants are harder to obtain, as some of these foundations have taken a hit with the market as well. So what this means is that we have a lot fewer resources coming into this area as we deal with economic trends at the state and national level. In recognition of all these factors, as we went through the Grand Vision goals and objectives to create more affordable housing, more well-designed affordable housing, we realized that one of the first things we were going to have to address is this capacity issue. We can't really achieve any of our goals and objectives at the community level or at the Housing Task Force level if we don't have the capacity to deal with these problems. So we created a housing strategy to design collaborative solutions and innovative solutions at the local level rather than continuing our reliance on state and federal programs. So we're looking at things like achieving greater efficiencies through more partnerships, working towards consistent land use policies, and enhancing our partnerships with both public and private stakeholders. Housing trust funds are an opportunity for us to work with local partners to achieve greater financial capacity to meet the changing needs and to meet those most pressing needs in a way that's flexible and is able to change as times change. As we've seen over the last few years, not a lot has remained consistent. So the creation of a housing task force has been identified as a priority strategy by the Housing Task Force, and are working with a variety of partners to design that and seek other funding opportunities that may support that. The Council of Governments has been working to identify ways that we can support that financially as well. There's other private partners have worked to develop some funding sources that would leverage that money. So we've been working with the Land Bank Authority for quite some time on some of the opportunities that are available in terms of private foundation and local financial support, and have created a Housing Trust Fund working group. A lot of the members of that working group are here today and are happy to answer any questions on the form that this proposal has taken.
All right.
Thank you.
Gene, is that end your presentation as well?
Yes.
Okay. Back to the commission. Commissioner Wheelock.
Mr. Chairman, for discussion purposes, I would move that we authorize the Land Bank Authority to move forward with the investigation and implementation of a Grand Traverse County Housing Trust Fund.
Moved by Commissioner Wheelock.
I'll support that.
By Commissioner Thomas to move forward with the recommendation as presented. Commissioner Wheelock.
As most of you know, 4 members of the Land Bank Authority are sitting here this morning, myself included. Historically, the Land Bank Authority has taken properties that came back into tax sale. We've partnered with organizations like Habitat for Humanity to create affordable housing. We simply have established that we are not meeting the affordable housing need of this community on that limited basis. If you look at the outlined project on page 27 in your packet, you see where this trust fund money of $8,000 of actual trust fund money is leveraged to create a very sizable expansion of affordable housing in our community. And, I think it's a way that we can see that we can take the money that we give from selling properties that are foreclosed or come back to us on tax sale and the revenue from those, and leverage that money to truly make a difference in the affordable housing needs in this community. And, it took me a little while to get through all of it and understand it, so I'm sure it's, a little strange to everybody to hear it, but, when you simply look at the numbers, the way that we can leverage small amounts of money that we actually have in our accounts from the sale of this tax reverted properties, to be able to truly make a difference in the affordable housing needs in this community.
Okay. Commissioner Richardson.
Yeah, and I would also, because I had a conversation with Bill Rokas about this yesterday, and this is not money that has been coming into the general fund. This is money that has been basically just sitting there for a couple of years, accumulating, and obviously I think we all want to hear, what the plans would be for, but as long as we can keep it, dedicated to this purpose. It seems logical that money that has come from, failed housing could be then, reinvested in future housing is a good idea for the county.
Yeah, good remark. Commissioner, Dennis Aloya.
I should move over one chair to leave a space. The question I'm going to ask, and this is for John and for Jean. I think this program is excellent. I really appreciate the creativeness of it and the innovation of it. It meets the county board's goals in those areas and the housing goals, of course. My question is, in the past 2 or 3 years, we took on Land Bank, decided we were going to be a Land Bank county. That has been absorbed by the staff. And now we're talking about developing a housing fund. Someone's going to have to manage that, going to have to work with that. And I know I've had discussions with John about, our staffing limitations now. And my concern isn't, we'll do everything that we possibly can, but I guess I want to make sure that if we implement a program like this, that we give it the best chance for success by having adequate staff to be able to really work with the program, and I'm concerned about that aspect. So what is your plans for managing this program with staff?
I can start, and I'm sure John, as the Director of Planning and Development, will add.
John, just use the one on the end, it'll be easy.
This is a proposal that we are developing, and that's why we wanted to come back to the county board to see, do you like the project that we have, so we can put a complete proposal together. And John and I have been working on funding sources for staffing as well. And John, if you want to say.
Yeah, one of the things we're trying to do in our department is, as we've, the Planning and Development Department, first of all, we changed our name to recognize that there's this planning aspect of that we do, but a lot of things we do involves development and redevelopment in terms of staffing, the Planning Commission and Land Bank Authority, the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority, the EDC. And one of the things we're trying to do is, as we're looking at the need for staffing, is to recognize that we don't necessarily want to, if we were to hire somebody, to not necessarily have them working for a specific board, but what we want to do is have staff that works for all the different aspects of the department, so that because we were a small department, we really need to have people working in all aspects of the department. Gene and I are currently looking at different funding mechanisms. One of the things we do have that was recently announced was we received the $1 million EPA grant for a brownfield revolving loan fund. We can use a portion of that for administration, and we're looking at similar types of sources to cover the costs of any staff at this particular time. We're at least looking at would like to add at least one person immediately, because we do have such like the EPA grant and the possibility for this type of program, but we're trying to look at to see where we can find those resources where we don't necessarily have to rely on general fund dollars.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Commissioner Wheelock and then Commissioner Richardson.
I guess the only point is that my motion was to investigate and move forward with the implementation. I think we still have, I think all of us involved still have some questions about exactly how this works. And, I don't think, I'm not ready today to say absolutely this is it. I think there's still some investigation and implementation, and I believe you will see a final implementation plan before any monies are committed or any projects are endorsed.
Okay. Commissioner Richardson.
Well, I would certainly agree with Commissioner Wheelock on that, because what this is basically a holding action to develop more information and a plan, as I understand it. Sarah, I did have a question. In your statement, you were talking about the reduction in housing resources for rural areas. I mean, is it possible to put a dollar figure on that, or?
I don't think I could put a dollar figure on it, but I can, just by way of example, the Neighborhood Stabilization Program is probably the biggest housing funding program in the state right now, and that's based on the rate of foreclosures in census tract areas. And I don't think that, I think we may have one or two census tracts that actually meet the state requirements to use that money. So some of the biggest grant dollars that MSHDA is getting are not available to this area at all.
Because we're not in as bad a shape as some other areas of the state, basically.
I think it's just a matter of looking at it. We don't have the same problems as other parts of the state. We don't have the rate of foreclosure and abandonment that urban areas are experiencing.
So does MCOG, obviously you must be getting some housing dollars from the federal government then, as part of your programs?
The Council of Governments does not receive funding from the federal government for housing. The Housing Commission, I believe, is one of the only organizations that gets direct HUD money. HUD dollars are generally funneled through MSHDA, and what happens is they have really broad program requirements, and then they grant the money to MSHDA, and then MSHDA puts additional requirements on top of those federal requirements, and then distributes that to housing agencies.
And I'd also like to point out that these dollars used to be funneled back to the state of Michigan, that this is the money, this is the excess money from foreclosure auctions that above and beyond what's needed to pay off the back taxes. This money used to go back to the state of Michigan. A few years ago, it started coming to Grand Traverse County because Bill Rokos assumed that role. So in a sense, we're getting access to this money and being able to put it back into Grand Traverse County instead of, back to the state of Michigan.
Commissioner Max Bauer.
Well, I fully support this. My only question is, and this is not something you might be able to answer, I'm looking at this Lake Ridge Townhouses, and it says that that Homestretch is proposing to construct 12 units, and the per-unit cost is $161,000. And I have this habit of reading the real estate ads every weekend in the paper. And, there are a lot of already available housing units for much less money that are perfectly suited for this program. Do you look at working those units into this program, or are you just building new ones?
We can both answer, but I also think this is one that was provided by Homestretch, and Bill Mary, as one of our working group, I'm sure would be happy to answer some of that. But this is an example of what can be done with the Housing Trust Fund. But I think to get into...
But it's not saying that this will be done.
It's not saying it will be done, but I think...
And I don't mind if it is. I mean, if you determine that that's the best use of the dollars, but I was just curious.
But to understand how MSHDA can create affordable housing, I think that would be a good opportunity for Bill, if you don't mind, to answer specifically that question. I think it would be a great opportunity to learn how MSHDA can make this work for this amount of money. So can you give Bill a couple of seconds?
That's fine. I guess my comment is that, like we said earlier, this is not an endorsement of a specific project at this time. This is strictly a creation of the fund, and these are examples.
And if I could add, some of the activities that, the creation of affordable housing is one activity that's been discussed, but also rehab or subsidies to lower costs of existing housing and make needed repairs would be another possible activity. So, existing homes would not be out of the question, I don't think.
That was my only question.
Yeah, that was your first example as a rehab, Commissioner Max Bauer.
Okay, any other further questions, comments? Commissioner Fleece.
Just a comment. I would have the same concern as Commissioner Max Bauer. If you're looking at affordable housing, $162,000 for one unit, my opinion is pretty expensive. And there's a lot of vacant places out there.
Bill, could you respond to that?
If you could state your name for us and then go with the microphone.
The project,
Could you state
my
your
name is
name?
Bill Mary,
Okay, thank
Executive
you.
Director of Homestretch Nonprofit Housing Corporation. The project that you were presented was just a sample of a project that we have been looking at, and we're not proposing to sell the house for $161,000. And I think that's where the misconception is here. We have subsidy in this unit. The MSHDA HRF grant would not have to be repaid. There's some other probable foundation monies that would not be repaid, and we would look to put these homes on the market for around $100,000 or less. And these would be nice 1,400 square foot homes. They would not be homes that are existing in the community. They would be new development for the community. But we wouldn't be selling them for $161,000. That's why we use the subsidy from MSHDA.
That's not our comment, though.
That wasn't the question, really.
Our comment is, and we're not concerned necessarily right today at what the cost of resale is, but the cost of construction, particularly when you have a lot of available housing presently out there.
New, nice.
Well, land costs have always been a factor here that you have to keep in mind. The land costs still remain high for us and also construction costs. This is just an estimate. It
You're
may come in
missing,
for less.
you're still missing the point. The point is not how much you sell them for, it's not how much that cost. The question is, why wouldn't you look to utilize existing buildings and renovate them? Because you can buy them and renovate them much more cheaply than spending $161,000 to add new housing to the community. That's the question.
And I would agree, you probably could do that.
And why
we-
can't you?
We can,
Okay.
but this was just a sample.
example.
That was just an
New
example.
All right,
construction.
yeah.
All right.
yeah.
That was it.
Okay.
I think the message is that some commissioners would encourage you, as you look at your overall plan, to look at that aspect, because there's a lot of that available housing, and that
Sure.
seems to
And the
be a better
dollars go farther.
utilization.
Sure,
Right.
definitely, and we are looking at that.
Okay, good comment. Anybody else have questions or comments before we take a vote? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes. Thank you. Thanks, Jean and Sarah.
God.
Moving on to the county treasurer, we have restricted funds. Morning, Bill.
Morning. Bill Rokas, County Treasurer. The memo I have in front of you today is our tax foreclosure funds, which, you know, you've kind of hit upon with the prior presentation. That's, I think, why they were before me. I have to make available annually our auction proceeds. They can be made available to the general fund with board action. So what I'm bringing forward for you today is, and there's also a lag in the timing that we bring you these foreclosure funds. I have to hold them a couple years before they're made available to the county to use, and that's mainly to cover any costs that we may incur on the properties, or if there's some liability that would come after the fact. So there is about a 2-year lag in when these funds are made available. This is a relatively new fund. We took over the foreclosing, as a foreclosing governmental unit roughly about 5 years ago. And since we've done that, the fund, actually there's two components of the fund. There's fees and costs of the foreclosure, and then there's the actual foreclosure of the property, the proceeds from the sale of those foreclosure. What this is dealing with mainly is the foreclosed property that's been auctioned off. Those are the proceeds that are restricted and have to remain segregated in this fund until they're made available to the county, and then they would be, depending on what the county board decides to do with those funds, then they become unrestricted. The past 2006, 7, and 8 funds I brought to the board, and in the past you've always just voted to retain those in the funds. We haven't really made a decision on what to do with those, so I continue to bring those with this memo. That's on the first page, 29, that's the $73,059. That's the net proceeds from the auctions of 2006 through 2008. The current year auction proceeds that we're bringing to you is resulted from the 2005 taxes, which were sold in 2008, and that had a net proceeds of $18,463. So the total to date in the fund that's through the 2008 auction is $91,522. Now, that's not the total proceeds from the auction. That's the net proceeds that are left over after these items that are listed are reimbursed. Mainly the delinquent taxes are the big costs that are reimbursed. So there's $91,522.46 that would currently be available to the general fund or some other purpose, like the trust fund or a portion of it to a trust fund, depending on some legal work that still needs to be done if we do go with the trust fund. You'll see that on the second page, page 30, that's the analysis of the whole fund. We do have at the end of December 2009, we had total assets of $424,266.33, of which roughly half of that is from auction proceeds. The other half is from foreclosure fees that have exceeded the cost of the foreclosure process. And those funds in the past have been dedicated for administrative costs for the land bank, and they've just been building up in this fund over the last 5 years. So in all, and I think you made this comment before, this $424,000, in the past, all of that money went to Lansing. Before we were foreclosing governmental unit, once the taxes started the foreclosure process, all the fees that we collected on those delinquent taxes and the auction proceeds were sent to Lansing, and they administered this program. So this is new revenue over the last few years since we've become the foreclosing governmental unit. So that's pretty much the report. I guess if there was a recommendation, I think you actually made it at the last presentation, but on page 25, I think, of that presentation, I think that was your resolution or recommendation, basically to put these funds on hold, but whether that needs to be made here or not at this point.
Commissioner Richardson.
My understanding was the action that we just took was on the $91,522.
Right.
Is that correct? And this question, Bill, may be more for Dennis or Dean than you, but are there any plans on the unrestricted fund balance, which I guess at the end of last year stood at $208,000?
There's an annual budget that's prepared for this fund. Last year, we did fund half-time person out of the land bank, out of these proceeds. It went up to fund not a position, I guess, but to help with the funding for
like position in planning
in the planning department, right? And the budget, will be presented to the board or through Dennis and Dean as to what the balance of the $200,000 that's not the unrestricted proceeds will be in that budget. But in the past, that's the big expense that we've taken out of this fund, other than reimbursing for all the taxes and the expense of the foreclosure. We have funded the halftime in the land bank.
Okay.
And the cleanups.
And some cleanups, yeah. Just, I guess, a little update on what's going to happen at the 2010. We only ended up with 12 parcels that we foreclosed on, so the bulk of the property does get redeemed prior to foreclosure yet in our county, which is a good thing. We have about $43,000 in back taxes that we need to recoup, and we've also initiated this year, we started some cleanup on the properties that we did foreclose on. We cleaned up 3 properties of the trash and stuff that was on the properties. And that was about I think it ended up with the landfill cost about $3,000. So those costs will also go against the auction proceeds or any proceeds that we get from the sale of those foreclosed properties.
Okay. So at this point, this is information only?
It's information only unless
Unless you want to do something with the unrestricted.
Yeah.
Okay. Commissioner Wheelock.
I guess my comments, and I don't know whether I do the motion first or, let's do the motion first. I'd like to move to retain foreclosure funds in a separate fund at this time and not take those monies into the general fund.
Okay, which funds are you speaking of specifically?
All of the tax foreclosure funds, which as of this point is a total of $424,266.
Okay, but we did act on the $91,000 in the last motion.
Well, yeah, but it's still left in the foreclosure fund.
Yeah.
We're just going to, if the plan comes together, then that money will be used for leverage.
Okay, I'll second the motion.
Okay, moved by Commissioner Wheelock, seconded by Commissioner Richardson to restrict the money within this fund and not to the general fund. Commissioner Wheelock.
I guess my comment is that this is an opportunity for us to use these funds to do the types of projects we've talked about this morning. And Bill's right, we currently use some of that money to help fund the person and the operations of our land bank authority. He just touched briefly on some of the cleanups that we did on these foreclosed properties. The pictures of those properties are pretty amazing, the amount of trash that people can pile in their yard and in their house, But I hope that it happened, but one of the discussions we talked about is when we went in as the land bank and cleaned up these sites, that a sign would be put there that said that this land bank site is being cleaned up by Grand Traverse County. We might as well get recognition in the neighborhoods that we are cleaning up these sites and give us some credit for doing that as part of the foreclosure process. So I don't know if it happened, we talked about it, but, the neighbors are very excited that we're cleaning it up too. So, it's kind of nice to get a little positive press once in a while that, this blighted area in your neighborhood is being cleaned up with the efforts of Grand Traverse County. And, and I appreciate everybody's activity in doing that. And I just think there's a lot of potential for us to help, the land bank expand, and if we take this money out now and put it in the general fund, we're not going to have the opportunities to use that. We may at some point or another come back and say we want part of it, but at this time, I'd like to hold that money available until we see where this plan comes to.
Commissioner Richardson.
Have there been demolitions as well as part of the cleanup?
We didn't demolish any of them, but
We have demolished a couple of years ago.
Yeah, but not in these four this year.
Not in the current ones.
Yeah.
But
That was the Habitat for Humanity
Yeah,
property.
there still is a possibility that we may do that on a couple of these parcels.
That is sometimes necessary, I would assume, right?
Yeah, I think there might be.
At least two of those that we looked at this time are prime for demolition.
Okay, any other comments or questions on the motion?
I just have one comment.
Yes.
Of the motion, it's, really, the money isn't going into a separate fund.
No, it'll stay within the restricted fund.
It'll stay within this fund, but it would be restricted. It'll remain restricted, so.
Okay, all right. Any questions, comments? All right, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Passes. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
Moving on to planning and development. Page 31, if we can ask Jean Dorenzi and whoever she would like to bring up, and if you could get those individuals introduced as well, thank you.
My name is Jean Dorenzi with the Planning and Development Department.
Ray Minervini from the Minervini Group, redeveloping Building 50.
Okay.
In your packet today is a proposed amendment to the village at Grand Traverse County, at Grand Traverse Commons. This was originally a 2002 brownfield plan. You just recently amended the brownfield plan in October of 2009, expanding the boundaries to include all of the city and the township for the village proper, and to include the Barnes area that is a joint recreation authority between the township and the city of Traverse City. When we put that in the brownfield amendment in place, we indicated that there was 4 MBTs approved at this site and potential MBTs that will be asked for. The state of Michigan came back and said, we want you to identify how many MBTs will be asked of this project. So the amendment before you today is only to identify how many MBTs will be asked for the Grand Traverse Commons. We have identified, or the Minervinis have identified, that there will be 14 additional MBTs requested in this brownfield plan. So that is the only amendment to the plan, is to identify that there will be 14 additional MBTs requested. This will have no impact on the taxing jurisdictions. All the taxing jurisdictions have been notified, but it's important to note that this amendment only allows the state of Michigan the opportunity to participate with the MBTs for this project.
Okay. Ray, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, this is a large project, and of course, our strategy from the beginning has been one bite at a time. Traverse City is a very small market. There's over 30-some separate buildings on the site, and it's almost impossible to do a project like this in one fell swoop, and that's the reason why we've separated the projects and are asking for multiple MBTs.
Okay. All right, we'll move it to the board. Commissioner Wheelock.
Mr. Chairman, I would move to approve the amendment to the brownfield plan for the Village of Grand Traverse and appoint the public hearing.
Okay. It's been moved by Commissioner Wheelock to approve the request to amend the plan to include 14 additional units.
I'll support.
And seconded by Commissioner Max Bauer. Is there discussion? Commissioner Wheelock.
I guess I didn't understand. I thought when we did this in October, we were all clear, but I'm not sure how the state figures we can identify all the MBTs that we may, as this project evolves, how are we going to be able to identify how many total Texas there available? I think it's a ridiculous request on the states. I think they should have allowed us to move forward with this project, and then as the development happened, then apply for the tax credit. But
Was our original goal.
they don't agree with me most of the time. So.
The other item I just want to clarify is that the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority is asking to hold the public hearing, and that request was made because of representation from Garfield Township being on the Brownfield, representation from the City of Traverse City, and from the County Board of Commissioners. We have 3 elected officials on that from all of the governing bodies. So we ask that the Brownfield Authority hold that public hearing on the 30th at 8 a.m. And the state of Michigan has indicated that the Brownfield can do that. So I just wanted to clarify that for the county commissioners.
Okay. Any other comments or questions from the committee? We have a motion on the floor and it's supported to move forward with the amendment for 14 units to add to the plan. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Passes. Thank you. Moving on to the application revolving fund. Thanks, Ray.
Thank you, Ray.
Tino, if you can get yourself introduced for us.
Absolutely. Good morning, everyone. Tino Bredup with the Traverse City Area Chamber of Commerce and the Traverse Bay Economic Development Corporation.
Today is a $250,000 working capital loan that was approved unanimously by the EDC board. Before we introduce the owners of the business, both Tino and I wanted to go about the history of how the EDC has been funded. Expand a little bit on your packet. In your second paragraph, it indicated in 1978, the EDC was funded by $800,000 community development block grant, which is federal funds that go to the state, that is then go to Grand Traverse County. We began this operation by loaning it out to companies that need to retain or create jobs within our community. It's basically gap financing and a risk financing that the federal government allowed Grand Traverse County to utilize. And it is, the final approval is with the state of Michigan. These are federal funds that must have the approval by the state of Michigan before we loan these dollars out. Tino, if you want to talk about how we've expanded from $800,000 to our current value.
Sure, I'd be happy to. And as Jean mentioned, when we got started with the seed fund, if you will, from HUD, the funds originate from HUD at the federal level and come to and through the Department of Commerce, now MEDC. And the first loan, I believe, that was done, so the county took a grant and then generated a loan to help gap finance the development of the Grand Traverse Resort. Those payments started coming back in over time. You use it as a revolving loan fund. You put the monies back out to work in the Grand Traverse County marketplace. I'm not sure of the total number of deals that the county has done over the past 32 or 33 years, but I don't think we've had a bad loan up until recently, and I think that's really reflective of the economic times that we've been involved in the last 2 years. But when you take a look at the revolving loan fund portfolio, you've taken basically $800,000 and you've built up a portfolio fund of over $3 million. You've got a fund balance of $1.1 million. You've got, technically right now, 10 deals on the books, so to speak. 2 of those are set to pay off, if they have not paid off yet, set to pay off early. So you've got more money coming in on early payoffs to add to your loan balance. And by my math, you've got about $2.8 million, which is fund balance and principal balance due. That doesn't take into account interest on those 10 deals. So probably have somewhere north of $3 million in a revolving loan fund program that started out as $800,000.
Wow.
So I think over the life of the program, it's been very, very successful. We have been encouraged by the state of Michigan. They have really kind of taken the shackles and the cuffs off of us, as I talked a little bit with yesterday with Commissioner Max Bauer and some of the history with this program. The reason we have not done a lot of deals over the last couple of years isn't, you would think, because of the nature of the economy and the demand and the need, that there would be a tremendous amount of need and a tremendous amount of lending going on. There is a tremendous amount of need, but again, as Gene stated, this program has typically been used as a gap financing mechanism. We have been adamant that the county be the last money in, not the first money in, with an attractive interest rate, that we're really, truly filling the gap, and that the bank is in, or other private investment sources are in, the SBA is in, or a combination of those sources. And we're truly coming in to gap the deal and get it done. And so with that, there hasn't been a lot of bank lending in the last year or so. Certainly there hasn't been any bank lending in the area of working capital. That's really been a lot of the need over the last year or two is young companies who are trying to grow their business with a working capital need, and you'll see that today with our presentation with the request before you to the County Revolving Loan Fund, that it's a working capital need for financing inventory and receivables. But the state has encouraged us to take more risk, to try and lend out all of our money that we have in our fund balance, and if we run out of money, there's been an indication that they would add additional seed funds to the program to continue to grow the program. And if we don't use the funds, if we are not active, and the state defines active as not doing a deal in a 24-month period, they have the ability or retain the right to take the money back. Because at the end of the day, it's their money, as they view it.
Okay. Gene?
And I think it's important that over the past 30 days, the state of Michigan sent us a letter, and Mr. Loya responded that the state of Michigan wanted to regionalize these funds and to take the funds away. And the state has, based on our objection, gave us a chance to work with the state and reutilize these funds to make it work for the community. So the state is really pushing us to use these funds for what it is for. It's to be the risk, to be the gap, create the jobs, and to retain the jobs. So we have been put on notice that we need to use these funds for what the original intention was, and that is to get it out to the community and private businesses to make it work.
Okay. Commissioner Thomas?
I would move that we approve the $250,000 working capital loan for Peninsula Wholesale.
Support. Okay, moved by Commissioner Thomas, supported by Commissioner Wheelock, to approve the request as presented to Peninsula Wholesale, Inc. Discussion, Commissioner Wheelock.
Gene, I think the one thing, and I think we all realize that the CDC money is here for the purpose of retaining and expanding job market in our community, and I think that's a great purpose. But I think that from the state's perspective, their criticism of us for not using the money, I'm not sure that we've turned down a great deal of applications. I don't think, it's not that we aren't out there trying to find those opportunities to create jobs and retain jobs in our community. It's just those opportunities aren't there right now. So, the state's criticism of us that we're not using the money for its stated purpose isn't necessarily, our fault. It's, we are there. Maybe we should market a little bit better, but I think it's not so much that we're not marketing our funds, just those opportunities aren't there right now in our community.
That's correct. When we met with the state officials, they they recognized that, but they also gave us additional tools to be more creative on how to use those.
Commissioner,
You are right.
And I would just add that, as your economic development liaison in partnership, we really act as the screener before requests come to the county EDC board. There have been deals that have been presented to us for review based on the county's reuse plan and how to go about utilizing these funds. There have been proposals that have come before us as a review team at the Traverse Bay EDC where we've been asked to be the only one in. And again, the thinking has been that we're not going to be the only one in. We're going to be along for the ride with other sources of funding. And so, we've done reviews where the deal being presented made absolutely no sense as related to our review, and we felt that it didn't even warrant moving forward to the next level because it just wasn't worth time and effort to bring it before the county EDC board.
Commissioner Maxbauer.
I'm kind of smiling because some of these questions, Tino and I had, we ran into each other twice yesterday, plus we had a telephone conversation, so yesterday was your lucky day. I have a question on the term, Tino. Term is 3 years, and it says monthly payments will be interest-only payments. May I assume at the end of 3 years there's a balloon payment due?
I believe so.
The interest only it's like a revolving line of credit. This is going to be a different, how we have looked at this working capital. We are having the bank be the administrator of the fund, so they will be paying interest, but they will also be paying that principal back. So they'll always have, basically, and the bank is here, and they can do a better job of indicating how they'll administer the fund.
But it says monthly payments will be interest-only payments.
They will be interest-only payments based on what they're loaned out that month. So, and then if it's $75,000,
All right.
they will, and then the $75,000 comes back, and it's now up to $250,000 whenever the request comes in. Mitchell, is that a fair analogy of how it'll work?
Yes.
You might want to
Get yourself introduced if you could.
introduce yourself.
Mitchell Blue with Traverse City State Bank. That we will keep track in terms of what the outstanding balance is, and then bill them monthly interest payments. So at the maturity, at the 3-year maturity, if there was an outstanding balance, then that would be due in full at that point in time. So prior to that, they'd obviously need to look for alternative financing. The thought would be that they would be seasoned at that point in time at the end of 3 years and have additional options available to them.
Okay, Commissioner Richardson.
This came before the EDC board last Thursday and was passed out unanimously. This is a little different because what the $250,000 is financing is inventory and accounts receivable. And that's where Mitchell and the Traverse City State Bank comes in, where they're actually just doling out the money that is needed on a monthly basis. Is this pretty much correct?
Yes, that is
And
correct.
so the $250,000 is actually the upper limit. It's not like we're going to give them all that money all at once and then, wait for it to come back. Okay. So they're actually going to administer it and just give them what they need to keep in operation.
Commissioner Wheelock.
Well, as I read this, last night, I wasn't thinking about the fact that it was an interest-only payment. I have a open line of credit myself, and I pay the interest plus a portion of the principal every month when I make my payment, and I'm assuming that they will have the opportunity to do the same thing.
Yeah, they're not,
They're not required to, but generally, good business practice would be to pay down that line of credit before its maturity, otherwise you have to come up with all of it at one time.
Commissioner Fleece, and then Dennis.
I'd like to know who the owners of Peninsula Wholesale are.
I'd like to introduce the owners. They can come up and It's for them to introduce themselves. Please.
Mr. Chairman, what I was going to suggest is for those people who may be watching at home, it might be good to get a little description of the project. You're all aware of it, we're all aware of it, but maybe a brief description of the project.
Can you do that
so that the public is aware?
Okay. If you could individually try to get yourself close to the microphone, no matter who's talking or whatever. But.
I'm Kent Gerbing, this is Jim Steckley, Steve Bagdon, Brian Houghton. I'll give you a brief description of what...
Well, would you restate the names, please? I couldn't hear them.
I'm sorry, Kent Gerbing. I'm
Jim Steckley. I'm Steve Bagdon. Brian Houghton.
Thank you.
Just a brief description of the project, so to speak, and what we're up to. Well, technically, this is a startup business. It's really a startup business, almost in name only, because we're selling established products to an established customer base, experienced personnel, and we're selling products for which there's a demonstrated demand. We're in the principal business of manufacturing and selling interior and exterior pre-hung buildings. It's fairly simple. There are some other products we'll be adding to the mix down the line, so to speak, but at this point, our projections are that the sale of doors will constitute 90 to 95%, perhaps upwards of 95% of our revenue. We're here before you due to the fact that the capital markets are severely constrained, particularly for working capital financing, even more so in Michigan in the construction industry for a startup business. We've been to anywhere from 5, 6, 7 different banks in town over the last 8 months, and financing for this type of financing for this type of a business in this climate is virtually non-existent. So we're here before you. We have the opportunity to create within the next 18 months 12 new jobs with 12 people who are presently unemployed, are back on the table, and grow from there. So with that.
And your company started January 1st, if I understand it, this year?
We reached the decision point to go forward last October. We opened our doors legally and technically, I guess, January 1. We weren't really taking orders until the middle of February.
And you presently have contracts for your product?
I'll defer to Steve and Brian to explain the nature of our relationships with our customers.
Right, we get called, we get POs from our customers, they call in orders to us, and our customers are lumber yards, home centers, that sort of thing. We don't sell direct to the public, we don't sell direct to contractors or anything like that. So our customers who are, we'll throw, for example, a Brown Lumber, they get an order from their customer, they call us, and we do have, at that point, we place the order and we ship the order to them when we're prepared to. So I guess, contracts, I don't know if that's the right name, but we do have POs from our customers already.
We've been identified, or designated, I guess, if you will, as the distributor for Masonite doors for all of northern Michigan and eastern UP. And we've also been selected by ProBuild, which is one out of Brown, as the preferred vendor for all their interior and exterior doors for all their yards in over 55. So all of northern Michigan and eastern UP, we have about 9 per lumber yard.
14, actually.
14 lumber yards. That's just an example. We have relationships with lumber yards and home centers all over the area, northern Michigan and eastern UP. As a matter of fact, I've invited Ted Shaw from Brown Lumber to come to me to explain from the lumber yard's perspective what our role is in the marketplace, even hear from our customers, and why there's a need for what we're doing.
Gentlemen, to be frank with you, I have a real concern for your request. Number one, you're a startup business. Number two, it involves the building industry, which is just about non-productive at the moment. You don't have contracts. I understand POs. I understand wholesale to retail. But a while ago, perhaps a year ago, we had a recommendation from the board to fund a locally owned family business that had actual contracts that were employing 20 people at the time, and had we approved that, this board, it would have employed 40-some people. And for reasons that I'm still unsure of, this board turned it down. I voted in the affirmative, but here you are, and they had an established record. Here you are, a brand-new business. You know, I think I'd feel much more comfortable if you came back in 3 years, you know, with some kind of a track record.
Let me respond to your...
You can speak more loudly so we can pick it up.
Let me respond to your concerns, Mr. Fleece, this way. The way this project came about, Jim and I were contacted by Steve and Brian last summer, and our reaction wasn't the same as yours. We were very skeptical. You know, we asked them, you're thinking about getting into the construction supply business in northern Michigan in this economic climate. You must be kidding. So we almost sent them away. And it was after a series of meetings and the persistence of Steve Bagdon that we began to peel away the layers of the onion, so to speak, and look behind the numbers that they were sharing with us and begin to understand why this business made sense. Because, as I said at the beginning, this is a startup business almost in name only. If you're familiar with Kellogg's, they were a local supplier, a wholesale supplier of windows, doors, and many other construction materials through much of the similar market. They disappeared from the market within the last year, basically because they were an Anderson window distributor. They are one of almost all the Anderson window distributorships that did not survive the termination of that distributorship. Anderson took away its distribution rights.
I'm totally familiar with that.
So that left a base level of demand that still needed to be satisfied throughout this market area. And our business plan reflects that base level of demand and assumes that we're going to stay at the bottom for some period of time. The difference between us, even though we're a startup operation, is that we're much more lean. We're designed to satisfy that base level of demand. And then as the economy grows, as the construction industry rebounds, grow with that increase in demand. We're not saddled with all the overhead, for instance, the Kellogg had, all the personnel, all the trucks, everything else. We have, by virtue of our salespeople, we have relationships with all the same customers that were being served by them for many years. Our initial series of employees, or set of employees, are experienced personnel that are doing this very same thing in that capacity. So we have the relationships with the customers, we have the experienced personnel that know what they're doing. There's no learning curve. It's a matter of just stepping into the void that's been left in the marketplace.
Do you own or have you rented the facility to do the manufacturing in?
We have a 21,000 square foot facility.
Where at?
Right here in Traverse City.
Location?
It's just off of Cass between 15th and 16th Streets.
Okay.
Another, if I can elaborate a little further, complete. And I would invite Ted Shaw to come to the microphone. Ted Shaw is one of the owners of Brown Lumber, and I invited him to come today to testify or speak on behalf of our customers, so you can understand why there is a demand for someone like us. Because right now, the only sources of supply are principally out of Detroit, Grand Rapids, Chicago. There is no local supplier other than Peninsula Wholesale.
And one thing that I wanted to add, back in 2007, 2008, and previous to that, when the economy was doing great, there were probably 6 or 7 and a few other small players in the market servicing a $300 million market from the eastern Upper Peninsula all the way to East Tawas and straight across to south of Manistee. And that's our general market, is the upper third of the Lower Peninsula and the whole eastern peninsula, eastern upper. So we're not just focusing on Grand Traverse County. We're going to be producing and shipping material all over northern Michigan and the eastern Upper Peninsula. Well, there were probably 7 suppliers servicing that market. And we're basically, in the market is, I don't know, 25 to 40% maybe. But there's only 2 real suppliers servicing that same market. So even though the market is way down, we can prove, and we've proven it in the last 6 weeks just by the volume of orders that we've received, we can grow it. And we can grow it quite successfully in a down economy because there's not as many suppliers servicing this market. And the real need for distribution, you know, as Ted will probably tell you, and many other lumber owners and kitchen and bath dealers, They want local distribution. They don't want to wait for their products to come from Detroit, Grand Rapids, or Chicago. They want to see product on the ground in northern Michigan and be able to order that product on a Friday and receive it on next Wednesday's truck. And right now, they're not able to do that. And we're going to be able to provide them with the opportunity to get material in that fashion.
It doesn't bother you that 5 out of the 7 are gone?
No, I look at it as a great opportunity.
Well, I agree, it would be a great opportunity, but perhaps you would be 6.
Well, let me respond to that this way. The example we use is that of a faucet. Right now, we've only cracked the faucet a little bit. We've almost been overrun by the sales volume that's been generated without even trying very hard. We know there's so much business out there, as we crank the faucet open, it can run us over. That's why we're here. We're capital constrained. We need to be able to grow and accommodate that business. In the process, create a bunch of new jobs for the community. We've been told by one outfit out of the Sheboygan area that as soon as we have our door shop open, we should call them because they have almost more business than we can keep up. And that's at the bottom of the market.
You presently not operating?
We're operating right now in partnership with a firm out of Grand Rapids. They're manufacturing the doors for us. We're splitting margin, trucking the doors from Grand Rapids to Traverse City until our door shop is up and running. We've purchased $300,000 worth of Kellogg's manufacturing assembly equipment that is being installed in our shop as we speak. And we should be operational within about 2 weeks.
So I find your comments interesting that your customers are unable to supply their needs from a distant source, and the examples you used was Grand Rapids and Detroit. In today's world, I don't know why a person couldn't pick up a phone and have a product from a reputable firm in a couple days.
I'd let Steve
Out of state even.
I'd like to explain that, just from a little bit of background. When you take a product like doors, and you can ship a flat door, you can probably put a few hundred on a semi-truck. By the time you hang it in a frame, and it's a 4 or 5 or 7 or 10-inch frame, you're going to be shipping a lot of air if you're going to ship a truckload of trucks from Grand Rapids or Detroit to Traverse City. And our business model, our plan is we're taking a raw product and we're adding value to that, and then we're shipping it regionally. It's very difficult and expensive to ship like roof trusses, doors. You take a product that you have to add a value to, it just gets expenses for transportation, where we're going to have it right here on the ground and manufacture these products and ship them, an hour from here versus 3 or 4 or 5 hours from Detroit, Grand Rapids. And economically, it makes a lot of sense. And as the economy constricted in Grand Rapids or Detroit or Chicago, those particular companies that were distributing products up here, they had to take care of their home market. This became a very expensive market for them to service. They're still servicing it, but not as well. And there's an opportunity for us, and Brian and I, we've been in this business combined 30 years or more. We have a great relationship with our customers, and they, to a customer, they would tell you they never wanted to see Kellogg Wholesale close. They needed Kellogg Wholesale. They need someone like Kellogg Wholesale, and we're going to step into that void and service that market. And I have no doubt that we'll be extremely successful.
And of those 6 or 7 people that were servicing this market too, I think only one of those guys went out of business. The rest of them just pulled back. It's not like they went out of business because they couldn't make it or whatever. They had to pull back, as Steve mentioned, to service the territories.
They got to protect their home ground.
They do.
What they're doing. And if we can get in there now, it's much easier to get a customer, and we're trying real hard to get those customers. When the economy gets better and they come back north, we'll already be established, and then they're going to have to work a lot harder to get that customer back from us.
And then they will flush.
Thank you for your answer.
Okay, Commissioner, let me make one, just to show you, since February 15th through the end of May, we've sold to someplace close to 150 different customers. And in addition to that, if we, from an accounting point of view, can't count a purchase order as a sale, but we wouldn't give the folks in Grand Rapids a purchase order if we didn't get one. So if we converted the purchase orders, that would equate to someplace north of $275,000 of doors in that period of time.
All right. Commissioner Thomas and then Commissioner Max Bauer.
My ears perked up when you said something about ProBuild. I know that years ago ProBuild was Wix, and Wix was serviced by Turner Bear out of Bay City, I think, or somewhere down there. Do you have any connection at all with Turner Bear?
Actually, they're Turner McLean now, I think, is that who?
Okay, well,
I think they sold part of it.
yeah, Jack was a friend of mine.
Oh, yeah. No, they'd be a competitor.
Well,
to a certain
okay.
degree.
I guess my question is, what kind of doors are you going to specialize in?
Masonite brand, interior and exterior doors. The Masonite, a lot of people think Masonite doors, they think of the molded doors,
Yeah.
that sort of thing, but they also have style and rail doors. So they have wood doors, they have the molded doors, they have also exterior doors, they have steel and fiberglass. I think they have one if you want to look at it. They have one if you want to see it.
No, I'm retired, but I used a lot of doors, especially from Turner.
customers.
No, as a matter of fact, I remodeled Jack Turner's house when he was alive. What was the other question I had? That was it. I was just wondering if there was any connection.
If I may circle back to Mr. Felice's concerns. Again, we were very skeptical at the beginning as well, but now there's been over $200,000 of private capital invested in this that's had to overcome that skepticism. And we are more than comfortable, and as are our partners, that we're on to something that's meaningful. There's a real demand, and it's a long-term, it has long-term value, both from a job creation standpoint and also a creation of value standpoint.
One other thing, Kent mentioned that we purchased, or he alluded to purchasing $300,000 of manufacturing equipment. We paid $68,000 for that in today's market. That equipment, you guys were talking earlier about the existence of life, that equipment was probably at a 15, 18-year life, and it was 2 years into that cycle.
Brand new in 2005 or 6.
It was sprinkled in over that period of time.
Yeah.
And that's being established right now, our line over there on.
Commissioner Max Bauer.
I've got a couple of comments. One is, this is state money, and if we don't use it, it's going to go back to the state of Michigan. Number two, this is precisely what this fund was designed to do. I heard Gene Durenzi say that if we don't use this money locally, we risk having it go regional. And quite honestly, I want it used in Traverse City. I want it creating jobs in Grand Traverse County, and this is what this fund is for. And I was somewhat skeptical in the beginning, but thanks to Tino spending a great deal of time with me on the phone yesterday afternoon, I'm very comfortable with this, and this is what this money is for.
Can you please lean into the microphone? There's still a difficulty.
Right now, we have 5 jobs. It's my job this afternoon to go over and make payroll. Annual payroll was over $200,000 today. And with the addition of our assembly line for production of doors, we anticipate adding another 7 jobs over the next 12 months.
Okay. Any other comments or questions?
7. That would make us up to 12, we think.
Any other comments or questions? Commissioner Wheelock.
I guess, I appreciate Mr. Shaw being here. He sat here very patiently all morning, but I do recognize that, even in my business, parts availability is not good locally. So anything that you want, you either wait for or it has to be custom made, particularly when we start talking about the unusual type products, which, a lot of these doors are going to be customed and those kind of things. And those products from a lot of sources are 6, 8, 12, 15 weeks away when you're trying to buy them over the, with your online companies and your big companies. So the fact that that product can be produced locally, provide local jobs, and keep the money in northern Michigan is a huge thing. And I think Mr. Shaw and I are both in the same thing. We try to buy as much stuff locally as we possibly can, but the fact is that there's just not production here or pricing and availability here for a lot of the products that we need every day. So then we're stuck going away from here. So anything that we as a group and through our EDC can do to produce products here in northern Michigan and provide jobs here in northern Michigan, we need to promote that.
Okay, Commissioner Felice.
I have another question for Gene. Is there a, yeah,
That would be you.
is there a personal guarantee, or the four of these guys, if they're principals, personally guaranteeing this loan?
Yes, the four principal owners that are here today are personally guaranteeing 100%, each are 100% guaranteeing the loan.
Okay, any other questions, comments? All right, so we have a motion. I just take one comment, is that, I believe I'm very comfortable with what the bank is going to do in terms of monitoring the credit. And that's really when it really comes down to in terms of the draws and the control factors. And that, they've placed, probably a loan agreement that requires, in terms of prior to advancement for the line, that they will comply with, the requirements of the loan agreement in terms of 75% of accounts receivables less than 90 days, 50% finished inventory, and 30% inventory work progress. So they will, on an ongoing basis, will be reporting to the bank, and then the bank, based on that information and based on the formulas that are in place in the loan agreement, would be advancing the funds. So we would have a control factor in place. So with that, all in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes. Thank you, and then this recommendation, again, will go to the board meeting at the end of the month, Wednesday at 7 p.m. All right, thank you for coming. All right, moving on to prosecuting attorney.
This is the first amendment this year for the Cooperative Reimbursement Program Agreement. It was necessitated for two things. First, to approve the amount to list the amount, $114,180, and then to change language that provided clients and people involved in these investigations in terms of their Internal Revenue Service data. I do want to point out that, as you can see, the appropriation for next year is anticipated to be down. And so that is an issue that we'll be dealing with the prosecutor during the budget process when we prepare his 2011 budget. But I would recommend approval of the amendment.
Mr. Chairman, I would move to approve the 2011 Title 4D Cooperative Reimbursement Agreement as outlined by the prosecuting attorney.
Support. Moved by Commissioner Wheelock, support by Commissioner Fleece to move forward with the 2011 Cooperative Reimbursement Agreement as presented. Is there discussion? Commissioner Richardson.
Dennis, is this year's appropriation down from last?
I apologize, I don't have that number. Do you know, Dean, offhand?
When I was looking at this yesterday, it is a 15% reduction. Generally, the amount that's built into the budget is not realized at 100% in terms of the revenue, just because actual expenditures tend to be less than we build into this. But I was surprised at, it's a reduction of 17,000, approximately 15%. I did not have a chance to look at why the numbers are down. I don't know, I can't answer the question.
Is that just based on the state just saying we don't have enough money, or are they claiming that there's not as much activity?
No, I think if you look at the detail on page 40, it's a function of the costs that are built into the budget. I don't know if our personnel time is reduced to be more reflective of what time they're actually expending on this work. I can bring that analysis back. I did not have a chance to do that. It's total expenditures are down in comparison to prior years would be my assumption, and it's a 66% reimbursement based on, the total estimated or allowed expenditures. I think it's a function of the personnel that are doing the work. There's less time.
I think this might, and we'll verify this for you at the board meeting, but I believe this might also be Remember the individual we had that was the state attorney who was working in our department, and that person is no longer working with us? I think it might be a function of they were being charged, some of their time for our match of that was being charged back to this, and they're no longer there. But I'll verify that for you for the board meeting.
Can do that today.
Any other comments or questions? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion? Aye. Opposed? Passes. Moving on to the finance report. Dean.
The general fund activity through the end of May is presented starting on page 41. The trial balance is on page 42. Real quick to point out, our cash balances are, the total accounts are positive. The common account runs negative, and you'll see that there's a corresponding shortfall or difference between revenues and expenditures, primarily because we have not started to collect any of the tax revenue because we're on the summer or July 1st levy, so that will improve here over the next couple of months. Then I get into some of the details, comparing revenues and expenditures on page 43. Trying to be brief on the notes. Certainly don't want to gloss over this or rush over it without making a few comments, but the tax revenues, and obviously we're not collecting the tax levy yet, but there are Board of Review adjustments that are hitting the accounts, and those are, more than we've seen historically. I try to keep you apprised of those amounts on a monthly basis. Some of the differences that you're seeing here are timing, as is the case with the state grant for the judges' salary payments. That's just the timing of when that was received. The local unit contributions, the PAT MSU funds, those are actually reductions compared to a year ago, but they're not built into the current budget. So it's indicating the variance, but it does not have, it's not a lost revenue, in terms of what we budgeted, because those revenues have gone away. The concern that I have at this point is mostly with the charges for services and fee revenue. Register of Deeds is down significantly compared to a year ago. And the item that's listed for MSU extension, those are, I'm on the wrong line, but the family court juvenile fees are down too, which is somewhat offset by the lower costs that we have in our child care fund as the counts, the client counts are down. So those are the main comments I would have at this point on the revenues. I did talk to Peggy Haynes, the Register of Deeds. She's not anticipating that the trend that we're seeing there is going to change in the general fund for the balance of the year unless we start seeing some of the activity that Kalkaska County is seeing regarding oil and gas leases that are being recorded. I guess there's some activity, renewed interest in oil and gas exploration, which may kind of flow over into this county. On the expenditure side, on the next page, the big items, if you look at the judicial function, it's the timing of when we've recorded the indirect costs. We did that sooner in 2010 versus 2009. And the public safety function is up significantly. And most of that, in addition to the items that I've listed here, and that's the third item down, starting with the HPL jail contract, is due to the fact that we had some staffing vacancies in the first part of 2009 that we don't have, or we don't have the same situation in 2010. We're more at a full staff situation in our sheriff's and dispatch functions this year compared to a year ago. And then the other differences, health, other, and transfers are timing at this point.
Okay. Any questions on that report?
I know that's a lot to cover real quick.
Okay. Budget adjustments.
A couple of the adjustments here, the EPA grant on page 47. our carryover grants, I mean, in terms of the funds that are budgeted and the prior year were not fully used, so this is a carryover into 2010, as is the case with the housing grant. These are multi-year grants, and we're, adjusting for the carryover into 2010. On page 48, this is the grant, AARA money, for the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant, improvements that we're doing not only in our facilities, but also some of the city facilities. The last item on page 48, the contract services, is the city share of the grant funding. That's why that's accounted for a little bit differently. I think that's it on the budget comments.
Okay, we need a move for approval. Moved by Commissioner Thomas, seconded by Commissioner Richardson to approve the budget adjustments as presented. Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, passes. We went on to the L4029.
A quick correction on page 50, the summary should say 2010. The subject is correct, but this is the 2010 tax rate request and millage rate. I had Dennis hand out, I had asked Lori to be here, but I didn't want her to sit through the long meeting, so Commissioner Maxbauer, she handed this to you?
Yes, she did.
Okay. Just to explain how this works, the reason we have this here today, the tax bills will go out later this month or first part of July, and we need to set the millage rate because the millage rate will be on those tax bills. And Lori has identified here the process that equalization goes through to calculate what our millage rate would be. And this is the same rate that we've had for the past 2 years. And probably the most important item on the L4029 is column 6, the millage reduction fraction.
This is on page 51.
Okay, page 51, which is the L4029, the actual report. But basically what the assessors and the equalization department needs to determine is what changes there have been in the overall tax roll, and whether or not we need to adjust our millage rates to comply with Headley. And Headley limits the overall growth in the tax revenue that we can collect. And I'm not going to tell you that I understand all of these calculations, but the end result is that we had a millage reduction fraction of 1, which means that the millage rate is not reduced. If that millage reduction fraction was less than 1, the millage rate would go down, and that lower millage rate then helps limit the increase in the overall tax revenue. So there is no reduction in our millage rate for 2010, and we need to authorize Chairman Thomas and the county clerk to sign this here this month before we issue those tax bills.
If there are any questions of Lori, she is participating in the BSNA demonstration project with all the townships in the city and all the municipalities right next door here. So if you have any questions, we can get her.
Commissioner Wheelock.
Mr. Chairman, I would move to authorize the chairman and the clerk's signature on the Form L4029 in regard to the 2010 tax rate request for Grand Traverse County.
Okay, is there support? Moved by Commissioner Wheelock, support by Commissioner Richardson to approve the L4029 tax rate as presented in our packet, which is 4.9838?
Correct.
Okay. Discussion, Commissioner Richardson.
I had a question for Dean. Can the Hadley millage reduction fraction ever be more than 1?
We actually asked that question last year. We were kind of tracking what was happening with the CPI, and we contacted the state because I thought maybe it could be increased, and they told us no. That's not the way Headley works. Once you roll the millage down, or back, I guess is the proper term.
Go down.
It does not
go down, but it can't go back up.
We were hoping it would.
Well,
And that wouldn't be to the benefit of the taxpayers, but no, it does not.
Well, and I think part of that is the issue is complicated by the fact that it's growth in tax, growth in assessed value or taxable value, or CPI, whichever is greatest. And last year, the problem was, which I don't think anybody anticipated, CPI was negative.
Right.
So, but in most years, there would be a CPI, a cost of living, so the number
Yeah.
would go up some, but no, can't.
No, that's.
Good
that's why I
question,
asked the
though.
question. Okay.
Any other discussion on the motion?
I think a number of us have asked that question, but the answer's always been no. Not much of an explanation, but just the answer was no.
Down, but not up.
It's no, believe us.
Okay, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Passes. Moving on to administration, 2010 budget plan. Dennis?
Okay, I'll just start out real briefly on this, and I'm going to turn it over to Dean. We're going to talk to you about two basic things today. First of all, how to handle the shortfall in 2010. You'll recall that we're estimating taxes will be about $750,000 less than what we anticipated them to be. That's not counting, I want to point out, anything that's before the Michigan Tax Tribunal. Right now, I think Bill told me yesterday, $67 million is being appealed with the Michigan Tax Tribunal, and the difficulty with that equates to another potential $300,000 if we lost everything, or if everything was stipulated to. The problem with that is that you don't know the timing on which Michigan Tax Tribunal might act. I mean, they've got thousands and thousands of appeals to hear. It could be tomorrow, it could be a year from now before they actually act on these. So, and we don't. Pardon?
I say or 2 years or 3 years.
Or 2 years or 3 years, that's a good point. And so we just don't have any idea on that. So what we did here is we brought to you an idea on how to handle the basic reductions that we need to make this year in order to get through this year. Now, having said that, one of the obvious questions is, why didn't we cut departments, why didn't we cut staff? And as we looked at that, and as we looked at this, and we looked at the fact that we're halfway through the year, we'd be in a position where we basically have to double the cuts in order to make up the money that we needed for this year. And so Dean and I talked at length, and we talked with the chairman of Ways and Means. We thought a better strategy was utilizing these fund balances and cuts in appropriation for this year, and then, as we talk in a minute about 2011, make the necessary $2.5 million in cuts where you have a full year to spread them out, and that's what we're going to talk to you about in a few minutes. So, Dean, do you want to make any kind of comments on the individual items, or just take questions?
I don't know. Let me make a few comments. What Dennis and I tried to do here was look at where we could reduce general fund appropriations to funds that have a fund balance. And obviously, we were looking for some fairly large numbers to kind of minimize the overall impact on the budget. Going through this real quickly, Fund 472 is the Capital Improvement Fund. That is the fund that we're currently making our 50% share of the 2008 road bond payments out of. Reducing the appropriation still allows us to do that. And based on my projection, it would leave a fund balance of $632,000 in that fund at the end of this year. A similar situation with the County Facilities Fund. The main sources of revenues in the first two funds are all, well, the first three are county general fund appropriations. So in the case of 472 and 471, we have a fund balance there because of the county general fund appropriations over time. The same is true of the child care fund, based on the expenditures that I've seen through 5 months. We have $50,000 that we can reduce there, and we do appropriate funds to the friend of the court. And the budget adjustment that I had made earlier in the year to cover their higher indirect costs can be reduced because there is a federal recovery on those funds. The health insurance expenditures are line item budgets throughout the general fund, and based on the fact that we tend to over budget health, retirement, and short-term disability, we have these dollars available in those line items. And there are the last item, we have open FTEs in some of the budgets that will help us realize the $15,000 there. So that's the real quick 2.5 minute run-through of the numbers.
Okay. So Commissioner Richardson.
We appropriated $1 million to capital improvements fund this year?
993, it was $1 million.
Because there was a small reduction?
Correct.
Right, okay, and so what you're saying is we're going to spend, if you take 300,000 out, no, let me do it this way. What was the fund balance at the start of the year?
$9.5 million roughly.
No, I mean the capital improvements fund balance.
Oh, I'm sorry.
1.2 million approximately at the start of 2010.
Okay, so we take 300,000 out, then basically we spent about another 200 and some thousand above and beyond the $1 million that we put in.
Does the $1.2 million include the $1 million that we're putting in this year, or the 900,000, whatever it was, Dean?
No, the 900,000 was on top of, I mean, the 993 was on top of the 1.2 that was already there, if I'm not mistaken.
The things that we're also, in addition to the road bonds, we purchased the New World software hardware. That's a $650,000 cost. Vehicles for the sheriff's office, $144,000. As I mentioned earlier, not that I can't follow your numbers, but with everything that we've committed to do, and with a reduced general fund appropriation, we would have about $630,000 in that fund, in the fund balance.
Okay, so, I mean, I'm not trying to drag you over the coals on this, I'm just trying to clarify. We have spent more out of that fund than we appropriated for this year, not counting the 300,000 we're talking about taking out.
Yes.
Yes, that will be the case.
Yes.
Okay, that's fine.
Yes, because we've got that ongoing highway, or road fund.
And the child care fund, I mean, basically, we make a $50,000 appropriation every year. What this really is that there was just $50,000 sitting there, you know, we're sort of like a year ahead on that, you're just taking that out, right?
No, actually, of all the numbers that are on this summary, that's the one that I'm kind of like out there for. I'm really looking at how their expenditures are tracking, the fact that state wards charges are down, the April state ward charges were $10,000.
Oh, okay, so this is the big fund, this isn't that DHS child.
No, this is the
I'm mistaken.
$1,068,000 general fund appropriation. I
Right.
feel we can find $50,000 there.
Okay.
At this point, anyway.
Okay, Commissioner Maxbauer.
Well, Dennis, I'm opposed to this idea in principle. I think what we're doing here is we're kicking the can down the road. We're putting a Band-Aid on a problem that I think we need to start addressing now. We're robbing Peter to pay Paul, in which Paul's extremely happy, but, you know, $300,000 out of the capital improvement fund, $250,000 from the county facilities fund. I think what we need to do is identify in departments, and I know you disagree with me or you wouldn't have put this in front of me. I think what we need to do is identify in departments where the money is not being spent and utilize that. And I'm just going to give you a for instance. And I talked to you about this before, and the only budget that I'm really, you know, I really have numbers for, and I know very well, is the Parks and Rec budget. And for instance, and I know it's only $500, but this is just an example. We have $500 appropriated for copying at the Civic Center every year. I've gone back 4 years, we've never used that $500. It's appropriated every year. We've got $100 for the Civic Center for UPS. We've never used it. You know, there have to be other departments where allocation is made like that. Why aren't we looking at that? And I understand that $500 is certainly not $750,000, but I do think that it's necessary to look at departments in that way, and why aren't we?
Well, as I don't disagree with you, Commissioner. As I said earlier, we thought that the best way to handle this in those kinds of instances is to look at that as part of the reductions that we're going to talk to you about for 2011. Actually, what we're recommending here fits very well with the concept of budgeting for outcomes. And the reason for that is this: that $500 that sits in that parks line item, for example, that doesn't get spent year after year, because it's in a separate fund, it ends up in the fund balance for the park fund. Same thing with the county facilities fund. Same thing with the child care fund. So it ends up in their fund balances. So these are funds that, I'm going to call them excess, as to use the term, but what they are is they were funds that were budgeted that were not spent in previous years. So first, what we're doing here is so this is actually what budgeting for outcomes talks about. It's cleaning out those expenditures that you don't need, noting them, and then when we get into this next section of the 2011 budget, I would expect a lot of those things would be actually cut out of next year's expenditure request so that they won't end up in a fund balance like this. So we're cleaning up the fund balances first, using that as the easy way to get through this year, and 2011 is the time when we would go in and make all those cuts. So I really think it's doing it, but it's doing it over an 18-month period. So I'm comfortable that we're going to address those things.
All set? Commissioner Wheelock?
You know, I guess, I'm not sure this is the way I would have done it, but I understand that this is at this point, halfway into the year, this is a way to do it, is to take it in out of the fund balances, because, you know, rather than go in and cut $1,000 here and $500 here and try to come up with $750,000, you know, so, and I do realize that these are fund balances in these accounts. The only one that I am concerned about at all is the child care fund, because a year ago right now, we were talking about having to supplement the child care fund to, you know, a tune of a couple $100,000, and now here we are, we're taking $50,000 out of the fund balance. So, but we all know that that's a moving target. We've talked about it before. You know, who knows? We may be in October, November having to put $75,000 back in the child care fund. Okay. But at least at this point, this brings our budget in line and we move forward. But I think we do need to actively be working on that 2011 budget. And, you know, I know that's our next item on the discussion, but we need to actively be working on that and be very, very conservative in the numbers we're putting in that budget.
Actually, in terms of the child care fund, let me just address that. It was $1 million appropriation in 2009. We actually, if you recall, Commissioner Inman still owes me a lunch.
Oh, that's true.
Because we didn't overspend it. But we raised it to $1.1 million this year, and now we're taking it down to $1.068 million because there was a little bit of fund balance in there. So it's still $68,000 higher than last year.
Commissioner Richardson.
I really support what you're doing here. You say excess funds. I think a better description would be idle funds. You know, money that's sitting there and really not doing anything, not serving any particular purpose. And Commissioner Maxbauer, as far as your comments about the, you know, $500 here, $100 there, I think my favorite last year during budget was the LEIN money that gets appropriated every year and never spent because the state never sends us a bill. But that all ends up being reflected in the fund balance at the end of the year. So basically, it cuts down on the amount of fund balance we use, which is a good thing, you know. So I would say taking this approach, I think, is an intelligent way to start it. And then, you know, we're obviously going to have to make some hard decisions about next year, but it gives us a little more time to plan for that.
We have a motion on the floor to accept the recommendation.
Is there a motion, or is it just a discussion?
Not yet.
No, we need to.
No, I mean, because the recommendation here just says discussion.
Well, I think he wanted to make sure, you know, that was...
We would like a motion to approve this.
Mr. Chairman, I would move to authorize, Ross would
I'll
like to
make
move
the
that.
motion to approve this
Thank you,
this
Commissioner Wheelock.
approach, or whatever language you want to put in there.
All right, moved by Commissioner Richardson.
Support
by Commissioner Wheelock. The staff recommendation
Get this thing over with.
as presented on page 53. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Richardson?
Yes.
Maxbauer?
No.
Fleece?
Yes.
Wheelock?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yep.
Inman?
Yep. Passes. All right, moving on to the 2011 discussion item.
All right, for 2011, Dean and I have prepared a strategy to present to you a budget, and we wanted to get your concurrence on that strategy today. Basically, what we heard during the last budget was that the board was unhappy with utilizing fund balance to balance the budget, which is understandable, and you since have set a policy of an 18 to 20% fund balance. So we have almost $1 million in fund balance in this year's budget. Hopefully, we won't spend it, but I expect we will spend a great portion of it. We have just acted on, and we know now there's a good $750,000 in money that we're short in next year's budget for taxes. And that may go up depending on the appeals. And then, just assuming consumer price index increases and negotiated contracts, we think we're looking at a number next year of about $2.5 million, less than what we have in the budget this year. That's the number Dean and I are going for. So if this budget is $39 million, we expect to have maybe $36.5 million available next year. Under those parameters, not using fund balance, and getting the tax number to reflect what's currently going on. So we've developed a strategy based on that, and we want to see how you feel about this. First of all, as we talked about with budgeting for outcomes, we're changing our focus from expenditures to revenues. The idea that we're going to use in this budget is to say, here's what we have available. This is what we're going to generate in any given year. We got to pull the budget in line with the revenues that are generated and expend within our means. And that's the basic strategy that we'd like to use next year. That means that we will need to go in and roughly cut out a $39 million or so, $2.5 million. And that includes any increases that might take place for things like I talked about, inflationary increases, contracts, other things. That just roughly is about a 6.5% decrease in spending from where we're at right now. What Dean and I are proposing to do is to ask the departments for their help in making this and achieving this. And this is still a work in progress, but basically what we would like to do is we're going to identify the revenue that's available in the general fund. And then what we're going to do is, based on this year's appropriation of general fund revenues, figure out what percentage of total general fund revenues each department is allocated at this time. So if the sheriff's department has $10 million in revenue, and keep in mind, revenues in the general fund include a lot of things. They include fees, fines, grants. There are many other things besides general revenue, like, for example, our taxes. For example, in Peggy Haynes's office, she collects maybe $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 more than she expends. That ends up going into the pot of general fund revenues. So while it's a $39 million general fund, what we're saying is any department that generates their own revenues, fees, fines, whatever, generates their own grants, those stay with the department. They get those up to the amount of their budget. And then what we're going to do is look at how much that budget needs to be supplemented with general fund in order to balance it out. And we're going to look at the 2010 revenues, and we're going to say, okay, after you take out the state grants and the fees and the fines, that $39 million comes down, I'm making this number up, it's just an example, comes down to $24 million. That's how much general fund money we distribute to the departments to make their budgets balance. And then we're going to look at each department. We're going to look at each department and see what percentages of that $24 million they're currently being allocated. Let's say in the sheriff's department, it's 28% of that $24 million. Then we're going to look at how much money we expect to have available from that source this year. And it's going to be less than $24 million. It's going to be more like $21 million. We're going to take those percentages, allocate the same percentages against the revenue that's available in the general fund for next year, and we're going to present each department with a reduced general fund allocation that will be combined with all the other revenues that they generate in their department. So, in my department, for example, if my budget is $3 million and the only revenue source that I have is indirect cost, and that's $100,000, So I have $200,000 of revenue that comes from the general fund to fund my budget. If that budget of general fund revenues goes down to 10%, I'm going to have $20,000 less in my allocation next year. So I would get a budget that said, here's $100,000 indirect cost, here's $180,000 in general fund revenue. Your budget is $280,000 instead of $300,000. Here's your staffing, here's your budget, here's the line items that you can't touch, things like computer usage, there'll be phones, there'll be some things that they're going to be limited on. And then we're going to say, present us in 2 weeks with a budget that meets this allocation. And the goal here then would be to present to you a budget that would be very much bare bones, based on the revenues that are available for next year, not using fund balance, and anticipating the cuts that we know will take place. Now, having said that, and so you'll get a budget that has lots of reductions. You might have 20 less positions in it, 25 less positions in it. I anticipate some departments will not agree to do that, and then Dean and I would have to go in and make cuts to bring that budget within line. So we would bring you a budget that is greatly reduced, similar to what we did in 2004, different process. And then you would have to consider the cuts that we made and take some actions on it. I think we're going to be in a situation with this economy where every 4, 5, 6 years, we're going to have to make a pretty significant budget adjustment to bring things back in line. There are going to be some things that we won't anticipate. For example, we talked about it earlier, under Headley, if taxes don't go down, if they remain stable with the $750,000 cut, and the consumer price index goes up, which it's up now this year, there will be some additional revenue that will come from that source because the CPI is up. That isn't determined till the first part of September, the end of September, so we know it in October when the state adopts the CPI and certifies the CPI. There could be some funds available there. You may determine during your budget hearings that instead of having the fund balance stay at 20%, you might be comfortable with it going to 18%. And that would free up several $100,000 for you to use for some purpose that you want to add back into the budget. But Dean and I feel it's really important to give the departments an opportunity to go through, not only to find those line items like the $500 copier charge and the $100 UPS charge, but also to to make some determination on which is the best way for them to provide service delivery within the means that they have of reduced revenues. So with that, do you want to add anything to that before we take questions?
That's a good summary of what we're thinking at this point.
Okay, Commissioner Max Bauer.
Dennis, I got my Parks and Rec packet yesterday. In it is a letter to the Parks and Rec Board. It says, and there's budget requests in here that were apparently sent to you. It is not my intent, this is in bold letters, it is not my intent to ask for any input related to the priority of these projects or to take input related to the priority of these items at this point. These items are simply items that have been identified as needs within our department. Now, we have a high priority item here of a $27,000 all-wheel drive SUV. We have a request for several added positions to the department's staffing plan. A recreational program, a full-time FTE. I don't know if this is to handle the baseball programming or what, but apparently and it says, the recreational programmer will be able to create new revenues and fulfill a strategic priority for the Parks and Rec Commission. I would point out that the strategic plan is not done from the Parks and Rec Commission yet. Plus, an added administrative secretary. Here we have adding another full-time secretary. We have a temporary on-call budget of $103,000 for part-time staff to operate the pool, and by Dean's own projections, the part-time line item for staff at the pool is going to be $161,305.12 this year. They are $58,000 over budget. The response to that, by the way, has been to close the pool on weekends. Clearly, the words contribution margin are a foreign language. Do your department heads understand that there's a budget problem here?
Not all of them do. What I have done is developed a letter that I'm going to send after any concept that you give us today, basically reiterating the fact that we're in a budget crisis, and that I'm going to be suggesting that any positions that open up during the rest of the year, that the departments should anticipate or attempt to keep those positions open to make it easier to make the cuts for next year. Let me say this. You bring up one specific example, but I could bring up several examples that I've received from departments indicating they need more staff, they need more equipment, they need more of this. But I will talk for a minute about that particular department, because I don't know if you've seen it yet, but there is a letter actually from Bob Cooney, and I told you myself that while he's putting requests together, I'm going to be looking for, and Bob Cooney supports this, a recommendation from the Parks Board on the budget that they'd like to recommend to the county board.
And I want to do that.
And that's going to be
Why we're being told we don't want to have input is beyond me.
Well, Commissioner, he's just meeting the deadlines. We could talk about this. I know this is a particular area of your interest, but he is meeting the deadlines that are put in the budget schedule to get projects in so that they could be there for consideration. But as I told you, your board is going to review all his requests, and you're going to make a recommendation that Dean and I will look at that falls within, hopefully, the parameters that you will agree with me today, and it's.
Well,
and I can tell you,
I do agree with you.
I can tell you
think this is
much of
beyond the
that.
pale.
Well, but understand, they were all given a schedule to say, get your budget in by this time, get your capital requests in by this time, just to have it all in the system. That isn't what we look at when we approve a budget. And in this case, particularly, not this department, but in all departments with this kind of a reduction facing us, we're going to be looking to all of them. We're going to be sending those budgets back. If Nate's got his budget in already, and it's all in there, it's going to go back to him, and it's going to say, Nate, you wanted $12 million? You got 9.5. Send me a new budget in 2 weeks that spends 9.5. That'll be true of parks, that'll be true of others. So that's yes, it's fair to say that he is putting his request in, and that's probably partially because of us, because we said, here's the process we use. But other departments have done that too, put in requests that there will not be money there for. So what we're asking you today is to say, this concept makes sense to us, and then we plan on initiating this letter to them and saying, we will have a general budget meeting with all elected officials and department heads in 2 weeks, at which time we will give you your revenue allocation for 2011, and then you will have 2 weeks to submit a new budget that meets those allocations.
The other concern I have is the process that the county board uses to prioritize. Quite honestly, a sheriff's deputy is a higher priority on my list than $500 for copying at the Civic Center. I'm just using that as an example. But because I don't want to necessarily pick on anything. So I guess my question is to the board, how are we going to prioritize where we direct our funds if we don't begin the budgeting for outcomes process?
I guess, let me, okay, we'll throw that question out, but Commissioner...
These are the comments I was going to make when she basically started the discussion. The problem, because what you're saying is, okay, we need to cut X percentage, and you're going to spread that, equally across all departments. The problem is it doesn't set any priorities.
That's
and
correct.
If nothing else, it institutionalizes the budgets we've had in the past. So inefficient agencies are rewarded more than people who have actually been making good use of their dollars. And it also removes from the decision-making process what Max Bauer just brought up, which is maybe some things are more important than others.
Mhm.
Maybe we only want to cut, say the sheriff, 3%, and we want to cut another department 8% or something. So I would hope that you would, try to exercise a little more, qualitative judgment instead of just quantitative.
Well, the difficulty with that is that what may be important to me and what may be important to Dean may not be the priorities of the county board. And for me to try to guess that, I'm telling you right now, I can't. I'm not sure that you guys have determined what they are, and I think that's why budgeting for outcomes is so good. Here's another point where Commissioner Max Bauer and I would probably disagree. I've talked with 2 consultants, I've talked with 2 counties about the budgeting for outcomes process, and I am convinced that it would be a mistake to try to rush this through in this budget process. I think we need 18 months. I think we need to do budgeting for outcomes in the 2012 budget. So the dilemma that I faced, and I actually made a recommendation to you several months ago, different than this. Several months ago, what I said was, or during budget, I said, how about we use fund balance for 1 more year, and we don't cut programs because we haven't determined priorities. I don't really know what all your priorities are. And keep things going through 2011 with the promise and the commitment that we will do budgeting for outcomes in 2012, and then you can make the cuts that you want to make where you want to make them, which is the way this should be done. The difficulty with that, as I thought about it more, and Dean and I talked about it with Bill Rokas, is it fundamentally doesn't change the fact that then you'd have a budget that has $1 million of fund balance in it. And while we may not be in a position in the next 3 months to know your priorities or determine your priorities because we're not ready with budgeting for outcomes, we know that we're $1 million overspending, plus now $750,000 in taxes. So, our thinking was the board's not going to be comfortable putting another $1 million of fund balance into this budget. That's the message we clearly got during the last budget. And so while it won't be perfect, and in fact it'll be far from perfect, it's better to bring the budget total in line and then reallocate in 2012 if you decide to reallocate in 2012. Frankly, if there are some real consensus priorities of the county board, I'm pretty sure those will come out during the 2011 budget process this fall. So if we go in and we cut 6.5% off of everybody, and that won't be 6.5% off everybody because some will have revenues that might bring that down to only 2% or 3%. And for some who don't have revenue, like my department, it might be 10%. What that will do is, I bring you this budget, and let's just, I'm sorry I pick on you, Nate, but you're sitting here. You're the only one. Let's say that it brings you a budget, and the sheriff says, I have to cut 5 road patrol deputies, okay, to meet your budget. Okay, and that's what's here. And every one of you say, absolutely not. Well, then there are going to be several opportunities there for you, either using fund balance, cutting in another location that's not a priority, or some combination thereof to get you through the year. So I would think some of those major things will come out during this budget. The more I guess the things that don't have great consensus among the board will not. But that's the theory. I mean, listen, I would be glad to, and I still think you could. I think you could spend fund balance again next year. Dean disagrees with me. I think there's enough money there to put this fund balance back in and get through another year until budgeting for outcomes is ready to go. But that was not the message we heard from you, so this is why we develop this strategy.
Okay, Commissioner Thomas.
I'm leaving in 5 minutes because of an appointment. If you've got anything you want to get passed, we'd better do it in the next 5 minutes.
Okay, Commissioner Fleece.
In your synopsis, Dennis?
Yes.
Dean called it a synopsis, a good synopsis. I was going to say it's just un-American, it's not the American government way. But I applaud you for that.
Thank you.
And Commissioner Richardson, it's not Dennis's position to select the priorities of the county. It's this county board, and you're the one that has to go out to your constituents and explain to them why you cut 5 deputies and you didn't want to spend fund balance. But as far as the little extras in the budgets, in government budgets, any government budget I've ever seen. You've always got $500 in the copy. And that they've used historically in the past for something comes up during the year. They'll go through their line items and pick all that out, come to the administrator and say, I found enough money in my budget to get this, if it's that important to that department. And if you go through and you completely strip, like Dennis said we're gonna do earlier, I mean, line item by line item, you strip them to literally, truly bare bone budgets, we better have a good fund balance then.
Well, no, I agree. I just think that, I understand that the setting of priorities and the passing of the budget is our final responsibility, but I also think that the county administrator can give some guidance in saying, you know, maybe this is more important than this, or maybe, you know, maybe we can afford to cut this program more than we can afford to cut this program over here. I mean, we do have a strategic plan with our priorities listed. I mean, it's obviously pretty general, but yet I'm sure most of us would agree on that stuff. I mean, that's how it came out, was, you know, was our decisions in the first place. And I'm just hoping that it's not just flat across the board. If that's what's presented, that's what's presented.
And it absolutely shouldn't be. When they present the budget to us, we should sit down and say, well, we're going to keep the deputies instead of laying them off. We're going to close the pool, there's X amount of money, and that's how we're going to accomplish that.
Commissioner Wheelock.
I guess, you know, this budgeting process is going to be an ongoing thing over the next few months, without question. You know, I personally, I'm not completely opposed to using some of the fund balance. I sat through this in 2004 when we had to do these big chops, and by being conservative over the last 5 or 6 years, we've been able to build that fund balance back up again, and those are good things. I'm not excited about doing a flat, straight across the board 6.5% reduction in everybody's budget. I don't think that's the right way to do it. But what I would like to see as part of the budget process is I want to see an itemized list of all of the programs that are run by each of the departments and what the cost and the benefit of each of those programs are. Then we truly have the opportunity to assess what is important to this community and what best serves the needs of this community. But we're not going to get through that all taken care of today. You know, I recognize that it is our decision, and I'm not going to put the responsibility on Dean and Dennis to say this is important and this is not. It's not their responsibility, it's ours.
If I could be allowed to make a remark, and then Commissioner Maxbauer. I think by trying to identify the priorities within the next 2 to 3 months and go through that process, I don't think we're going to be able to do that in a fashion that I think it's going to lead us into what we really need to do in a longer-term situation.
I think we can.
I think that actually, Sonny, that, you know, it would be my expectation that when Dennis gives the budgets to the departments and the various boards that monitor the departments, that they would have a discussion about how they feel about the priority within their division and area, and that's how they will make recommendations that would be submitted back to us. So we would have that benefit of having staff already. I would hope that would be part of the direction that administration would give in terms of how they would submit the budget back to us. And with respect to fund balance, I don't have an issue with using some of the fund balance as long as we understand it's a one-time appropriation. It's basically there for an economic stabilization fund. We got, I don't know what it is, 20% still. We're still comfortable with an 18 to 20% range, so we still have, you know, some margin room to make those decisions, as Commissioner Maxbauer said, about, you know, maintaining programs until we actually go through, hopefully, a formal process. So I would hope that the department heads would begin to use the concepts of budgeting for outcomes to make the recommendation for 11. And hopefully Dennis can articulate the concepts in a memorandum, and if necessary, have them go through some initial discussion and training to do that. Dennis, I would hope that in conjunction with that whole discussion of the 11 budget, that we could come back with some recommendation prior to September, I would hope, that we would go out for requests for proposals to do the budgeting outcome, so we're starting the process.
Yep.
So when
I agree.
if we can get the proposals in and make a decision before year end, then we can start that process at the beginning of the year. So I think we do a couple things in tandem. We do the 750. We ask the departments to look at it from the concept of budgeting for outcomes. We can lay that out, and then we actually go out, do an RF request for proposals, and then we actually effectually start the program January 1 of 11. I mean, that's what I would like to see. Dennis?
I'm fine with that. I think the commissioners have made a number of good comments, and I understand the imperfection in this strategy. How about this? Dean and I are just trying to respond to, or think as you talk about this. What if we do basically what we talked about doing, but in addition to that, and just as an idea, we build into the budget a $500,000 or $750,000 contingency line item that will then allow you to begin to, you could take that money during that budget process. I'm not talking about a regular contingency. I'm talking about a special one that you could then use to reallocate back to priorities that you identify in this budget.
In other words, if we're taking, that money would be basically spending fund balance.
No. What I'm saying is, instead of cutting 2.5, we might cut 3 1/4.
Oh, okay.
And then, now we'll get everybody back to bare bones. Then, we show you an allocation of $750,000, let's say. Okay. And then, Dean and I will have interviewed every department, and as part of our budget recommendation, we will give you a list of what our priorities are to reallocate that $750,000 back into those budgets. Now, of course, you don't have to take those, but that will give you a way to get input from us about what we think the priorities are based on sitting with each department and saying, look, you made me cut this, and and then we could give you a list of priorities to help you during the budget process. And then, if we don't put any fund balance in there, there's still, as Commissioner Inman said, between 18 and 20%, that's a couple of percent, that's $400,000 or $500,000 that you could decide to use, and that would give you some flexibility to increase that budget up in those areas that are priorities of yours. It puts a lot of pressure on you without having budgeting for outcomes in place, because it's hard to really know, as Commissioner Wheelock said, the cost of the individual programs. But I'll be able to identify some costs of those programs through the cuts, because departments will be forced to come to me and say, well, look, if I could add back in, the Marine Patrol, this is what I would need, you know what I mean? And so I could identify that, and Dean and I could kind of tell you which we think are the priorities in that area.
Commissioner Maxwell.
Well, I've said this for the last 2-3 years, and I'm going to repeat myself. I really do believe that we are in a state of permanent fiscal crisis. The state of Michigan has 9 million residents, and we clearly cannot support 9 million residents. The industry is gone. Grand Traverse County is slow behind southern Michigan, but it's coming and it's not going away. And for us to simply use, we'll spend fund balance as an answer, no. We have to start right now, and we have to make our priorities. We have to take a look at programs like the fire educator for Metro Fire. Yeah, it's a good program, but should that be funded by the county board? Or if it's a valuable program, should Metro Fire or the 3 fire departments fund it? Put it in their budget. What is the appropriate way for our money to be used? And I'm going to say it one more time, and then I'll be quiet. We are in a state of permanent fiscal crisis. This isn't going away, and we have to deal with it, and we have to start dealing with it now.
Okay, good. Further comments or questions? So, do we or do we not have a consensus on direction for 11?
I think the administrator's proposal is fine, and
I agree.
I think he understands what the consensus.
So we have a consensus on his recommendation.
Okay.
And Dennis, what about?
It's a good starting point.
All right.
What about the timing for requests for proposals for budgeting outcomes.
I'll have something ready for you in September during your budget process so that we can get that going. I want to do some more interviews of some of the county administrators in places that I was given to see how it's working in those areas. And, you know, frankly, I know 2, maybe 3 different groups that could do this work for us. And so I think we could do a pretty quick RFQ on it and select a firm.
Dennis, are you going to look at contracting services where we can, where we might be able to save money in the budget?
There are a couple of places where I've already had discussions with department staff about that.
Okay.
All right, good discussion. Moving on, there's no unfinished business. We're in the new business. We have the 2% review of the tribal funds from the subcommittee. Commissioner Wheelock was the chairman, if you'd like to make a report.
We interviewed 16 of the 17 applicants, I believe we actually did physical interviews with. These are nonprofit organizations that are applying for 2% revenues from the gaming monies from the Grand Traverse Band of Ottawa Chippewa Indians. Historically, you remember that we've always just rubber stamped all of them and forwarded them to the Grand Traverse Band, and that they had never allowed us to prioritize or comment on which programs we would recommend for funding. This time we put together a criteria, and the 4 commissioners that did the interviews each ranked each of the applicants individually, and the compilation of that is on page 55 in your program. We basically separated them into 3 groups. The highest ranked applications included the Grand Traverse Health Department, Father Fred, Department of Human Services, Traverse Health Clinic, and the Goodwill Inn. The medium ranked applications included LEA, Child and Family Services Elements Program, Third Level Crisis Center, Community Living Center, Big Brothers Big Sisters, and Angel Works. And the lowest ranked applications included the American Red Cross, Grand Traverse Pavilion, United Way, At-Risk Boxing, Child Family Services Pregnancy Counseling Program, and the Traverse City Junior Golf. Now, what you need to understand is that Grand Traverse Pavilion, while they may be a priority in our minds that it's important to maintain in this community, the application for funding was for blanket warmers, so as that they could have warm blankets for some of their residents.
200. It was 200 residents.
Right. Well, if they got the money, they would have the capabilities of warming 200 blankets or something like that. And it just didn't score out as high as some of the other projects. Not that these are not valuable programs, and what I think, at least from my perspective, we heard overwhelmingly through the interview process was there is a lot of groups in this community that are truly out there dedicated to meet the needs of this community. And, you know, there's only so much money, and even though we are moving these forward with these rankings and comments with it, the sole discretion of how the money is distributed still remains with the Grand Traverse Band. Now, if the compact is when the compact is rewritten in 2013, I suspect that will change in line with the way it's done in other communities that had subsequent pacts. But the pact with the state and the Grand Traverse Band gives them sole discretion how the money is raised. But I do appreciate the opportunity on their part to at least give us some input of which of these programs we felt were a priority.
Okay, Commissioner Fleece.
I would make a motion that we approve the recommendation of the 2% Application Review Committee as presented.
Support? Support. All right, moved by Commissioner Fleece, supported by Commissioner Richardson to approve the recommendation as presented by the committee for the 2% tribal grants. Is there discussion? Commissioner Richardson.
I'd just like to thank the 4 commissioners who put a lot of time and effort to do this, because I know it wasn't an easy task, and thank you for doing that.
I appreciate that. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes. Okay, we have the item that was added to the agenda, the sheriff's request, Nate Elger.
Move Nate up. He's been here for hours.
He came at the last minute.
You're right to, I don't know if we're worn down or just fired up.
Good morning. My name is Nate Alger, Under Sheriff of Grand Traverse County Sheriff's Office. Very interesting discussion here, and
You want to change your request to 8?
I do actually. I'm going to amend it right from the podium. We applied last year for COPS funding. We asked for 6 officers for community policing through the Department of Justice COPS hiring program. We were denied that funding. The June 2nd, CHP offered a second round of funding for the fiscal year of 2010, and we are only able to ask for 3. Initially, our beliefs were with the reduction in funding from the schools, we would ask for 2 through that program. And hearing this morning's discussion, I am strongly considering asking for 3. That is our total that we can even ask for. Whether or not we'll get the funding, I'm unsure. We did not even come close to their scoring mechanism last year, and it's kind of complicated, takes into account several factors that I don't fully understand. But we would like to make the application.
Commissioner Wheelock.
Mr. Chairman, I would move to authorize the Grand Traverse Sheriff's Office to make application to the Grant COPS hiring program for up to 3 deputies.
Okay. Support. Moved by Commissioner Wheelock, support by Commissioner Fleece, to move forward with the COPS grant application up to 3 officers. Is there discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes. Thank you, Nate.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Nate.
See, we should have
Wow,
moved you
should've
up.
took that
I mean,
first.
you
He's
have
happy. He got approved, so.
All right, thank you.
If he wouldn't have sat through that, he would have asked for 2.
That's true.
This is true.
That's true.
Okay, we have second public comment, and there is no public here at this moment, so we'll move on to commissioners' reports. Anybody want to bring anything up? Commissioner Maxwell.
I'll be very brief. Russ Clark and I met with Danny Brown yesterday about a program that the Parks Board is thinking about implementing, and that is trees that are purchased as a memorial for someone that you've lost or someone that you love, or a new grandbaby, whatever. Russ identified a number of trees that would work well in the Civic Center. Danny Brown indicated his enthusiasm for the program and the fact that his department would be willing to plant the trees. We're moving forward with it, and hopefully we can put the program in place before fall so that we can go buy trees once a year.
And then there'll be a little plaque.
What we're talking about is one plaque at the Civic Center,
okay.
and have the tree numbered so that people can refer to that one plaque. We don't want 100 plaques in front of trees throughout the Civic Center. Danny said that he thinks that it would be nice to have it inside the building, but wherever.
Wherever the Parks Board decides.
But one plaque, and there are areas where we really do need trees in the Civic Center. And there are also areas at the Keystone Soccer Complex where we could use some trees.
You could have a map like they have.
That's what I was just thinking.
The map at the Commons, with
Yep.
all the trees identified.
Yep,
Sure.
and that's kind of what we're moving
Pretty cool.
towards, and I think it's a win-win, so I just wanted to report that.
Anyone else? Commissioner Fleece.
Monday night at the Mayfield Township meeting, the board and the chairman of their planning commission asked me to converse with Dennis about exploring the possibility of a countywide ordinance that, if it was possible, that would govern injection wells, both Class 2s and Class 1s, as they're faced with the decision they're waiting right now, going from a 2 to 1 in Mayfield Township. And I think that's an excellent idea, and I thought perhaps administration could check with John Axe and see if something like that was possible, and maybe if the board would consider doing a countywide ordinance. Mayfield presently is checking into a township ordinance, but of course, like they said, countywide would be much better, so.
Well, you probably need to check with the prosecutor, because based on what he had us do with the noise ordinance and the junk ordinances, they were all disband as countywide ordinances, and the townships had to adopt them independently.
But that was my plan. I will check with the prosecutor and John Axon. I'll find out what we can do.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other commissioner reports? Commissioner Wheelock?
It's not truly a report, but I'm just going to let all of you know that I have or am in the process of quoting the hand railings for the new step construction to multiple contractors within the area that are bidding that project. You know, I told you up front that, you know, I do that every day. So, you know, I just want you to know I am in the process of quoting that to at least 3 different contractors.
Okay, appreciate that. Dennis?
I have 2 quick things that I want to mention. 3, Bob Osterhout will be here at the board meeting to do that update on solid waste. Next Wednesday, the 23rd, MSU will have a transition meeting, a transition task force meeting in Gaylord from 2 to 4. This is the meeting where they're trying to figure out what their new extension is going to look like. I'm on that transition team, and we had a long conference call last week on this, and I think I told Commissioner Inman, I think we opened their eyes to some of the concerns that counties are going to have over this whole thing. But I wanted to mention it because they're asking as many county commissioners as could be there to be there. I'm going to be there, and I'm just going to ask the board if 2 or 3 of you are available, or even 1 or 2, I would love to have you go with me and kind of let your comments be known. This will be the director of MSU Extension who will be there, Tom Kuhn. I think it's real important that they hear. Let me give you an example. We didn't send anybody to the last meeting they had last fall. The consensus of those meetings was the #1 MSU Extension program that needed to be funded was 4-H. Now, I don't know how you folks feel about that, but I was sitting there going to myself,
4-H?
I don't think that may not be a priority of our county board.
4-H?
I mean, it may not be the top priority of our county board. So what I'm saying is, they're in a real kind of transition, and I told them that. It may not be. It may be one of several. But I'm just saying, I think I'd like, if some of you are available, I'd love for you to come with me, because they need to hear from county commissioners as well as us.
I would be available for that, Dennis.
Okay, I'll send you a note around, and if any of you are available.
Can you send the information about date and time and where it's located and stuff?
Yep. One more thing then, these things are kind of developing by the moment. I got a call late yesterday afternoon from Charles Peterson. He is working. He is disconnecting equipment and pulling it out of Boardman. He's moving over probably the next day or 2 to Sabin. Okay. 2 things have come up, one in the middle of the night again. But yesterday afternoon, he called me to say, does the county want the trash racks? Do you want to have the trash racks? And I said, well, give us a price, you know, we'll consider that. Well, I think his price is too high. He wants $1,500 a month for the Boardman trash rack, and he'll sell it to us for $45,000. And so
You said we could buy them from Pennsylvania for $30,000
2 of them.
installed?
2 of them.
But 2 of it, from
yes.
2 dams worth.
Delivered.
Delivered.
And so, I'm assuming the board would like me to just politely tell them, take the trash racks and get them out of there. We have a plan to do something different. And then last night, he conversed with Beth Friend, and she sent me an email this morning. He is saying that FERC is adamant that they don't want us to remove the generators, the emergency generators. Well, first of all, FERC doesn't, and I talked to him twice yesterday, he never mentioned it to me, he talked to her about it.
Why would FERC talk to them and not us?
Well, first of all, FERC has no more jurisdiction over the dams, because we're not generating hydropower.
Right.
Secondly, I don't know what was conveyed to him about what we're doing at the site. Finally, we have 5 portable generators in our DPW department that are on trailers that George and I have talked can be moved from it to any of those sites as necessary. So I really don't see a need for the generators. I'm going to tell them to take them out.
Right.
Okay? That's all I had. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Notices, announcements, anything there?
Let me just say, Mr. Chairman, there was a mix-up with the attorney. He thought this was a board meeting tonight. At 5, or Ways and Means at 5. So he is not here, and I'll bring him back next month, so we do not need a closed session.
That works.
So we will not have a closed session.
I mean, last time, Ways and Means lasted 35 minutes.
I know.
With a closed session. The whole meeting.
Yeah, but I think Inman wasn't here.
Oh, that's right.
That's true.
That's right.
Blame it on me. Okay.
Move to
I
adjourn.
believe we need a motion to adjourn.
All gone now.
Moved by Maxbar, supported by Richardson. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We stand adjourned. Thanks.
So I'll start on